Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to RLAfterShock, the longest-running weekly show for everything that is EU Rocket League Esports, now rated as maddeningly pathetic, if you've been watching the Discord, by the way, Bacon.
I'm so proud we've got to that level, you know? Oh.
Yeah, mate. I feel like we've achieved something real, man. Like, fucking all this work we've done for the past, 6 months, and it all has led up to this very moment right here. Our first hater who wasn't even bothered to respond to my counter comment.
Because literally, that means you've made it. Because before that, it's just your friends and family, backing you, giving you that all that support. So if you get your first hater, it actually means that people are recognizing you.
Yeah, mate. And with many more to come, we have 2 words for you. Fuck you. Let's get on with the show. In today's show, we're talking everything about Dreamhack Dallas that went down this past golden weekend. Of course, it was an amazing weekend of which I got to watch none of it, but whatever.
You've got the VODs, right?
I've got the VODs. I've been going back through as many VODs as I can, but there have been so many matches to watch, man, and it's just doing the minor stuff this past golden week and going on for the next couple of weeks as well. It's just like, I have been a very busy boy, and I haven't watched as much as I really wanted to, but I have watched a little bit, and I have enough to talk about stuff today, as you have, of course, Bacon. We'll also be talking about some RLEsports expansion plans as we try and break down everything that will be coming up in the next season for the off-season as well, factoring in everything that is the Epic Games purchase as well. We'll also be talking about a little bit of mailbag questions, of course. Actually, we're going to start with the mailbag, because, Bacon, there was no news this week. Literally no fucking news. Nothing at all esports related. There was some drama, but to be honest, I don't think it's really relevant, so there is nothing essentially for this week. It's been a very slow news week. I think everybody has been focused on the Dreamhack Dallas LAN and the RLCS LAN coming up soon and the off season that will be, I think, pretty bare, all things considered. So there's not been a whole lot going on.
Yeah, there's pretty much been nothing going along apart from the pro players and that all just memeing on Twitter, and that's not really news now, is it?
I mean, I wish it could be, because if it was, we'd have a shit ton of content every week, but
God.
I digress. So, no news this week, but we will talk about some mailbag questions. We got one mailbag question. Of course, if you do want to ask us a mailbag question, then you, of course, can follow the Discord link in the show notes and video description of every single podcast and go join our Discord where there is a mailbag channel, which you can ask us a question, and chances are we'll answer it live or record it on air. I promise it'll be live soon. I'm trying to see if we can organise that shit. But this one comes in from Hamster Kibbles. Only one question, but new member to the Discord. Thank you very much for asking us a question. Relatively new to the podcast, so apologies if this has been addressed previously, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on if Psyonix or Epic should incorporate club colours into RLCS or RLRS matches, i.e. Dignitas play on the yellow half, Barca playing on red, etc. I don't think we have answered this on the podcast yet, Bacon, have we?
We sort of have, but not to this question. Essentially, what he's saying is Dignitas will always play on, let's say, orange because it's close to the yellow and they use their yellow cards and makes it easier. And Cloud9 always play on blue because Cloud9 is a blue team. We've said in the past, that's not a problem because just it doesn't really matter there, but it's more about the cars having their home and away colours, so the current system, all the cars are fucking black, and it makes it really hard to distinguish. I can remember at the weekend, I think it was EG facing another one of the teams, and there was just black cars, the difference being EG's slight blue on it compared to the yellow on the opposite team. Probably was Dignitas, thinking about now, but I know they didn't face off against each other this weekend, so I have no idea who it really was. But looking at it now, just change that black for white and you're solid. It makes it so much easier for viewers at home to just at a glance know the difference between a black and a white car, or if you really want to get colourful with it, allow it, because, the team colours and that. We've seen it in Bacchus mod, the PSG mock-up, which, of course, never came to light in the game because probably legal problems. They couldn't get the contract signed in time, but that was a blue and reddish car. Now, just to be able to give 2 different color palettes so that if it does come around to a game, the same as in football, this team's like Man U going up against Liverpool, both have red kits. You can't have that on the same pitch. So Man U's, let's say they're playing away at Anfield, they would change over to a blue kit for that one or a black one. Just makes it super easy to distinguish each team. And the fact that we don't have this in Rocket League at the moment is a massive oversight.
I mean, I'm a bit more on the fence about it. I understand why Psyonix have opted not to do any of the whole team colors thing, because they wanted to go with the standard blue and orange that we have in the game on default, sort of like like what we have when we play matchmaking or anything like that. Which I understand why, because obviously it attracts the casual viewer. But with the way that esports items have been implemented, and with Psyonix now asking teams to wear their team colors during the during the RLCS matches and shit, like we're already halfway there. You might as well just go full frontal. And also, it's a massive help for me personally, because I keep calling blue and orange CT&T side because I've been casting so much Counter-Strike. If you're watching TCS this past 1 week, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Just blundering my way through a cast. Like, yeah, on that CT... no, that's the other game.
But again, like I said, it's been implemented before, so this should have been stuff that they've looked at other esports for. My example being Overwatch League, purely because they have this. Each of the teams have their own colour for their main kit, and then their away kit is just a bog standard white with their accent colour. So whether that be pink, yellow, blue, whatever, as the secondary colour to it. So it essentially makes it so every team has a bog standard white away kit, which they've just got to put up with if they have clashing colours on that. And it's probably one that's not going to be used that often. Well, it would be, because all the main kits are black in Rocket League, but you know what I'm saying, where it's only used if it has to. If the two colours don't clash, it's not needed, but it's just a bog standard easy colour palette swap.
Yeah, I agree. I 100% agree, to be honest. Like, again, I feel like that would just enhance the experience a bit more. Like, I feel like it gets confusing at times for a lot of people when they see something like a... also,
at the same time, it'll give more value to those esports items, where you're looking at that now going, I've got to pay $5 just for one decal. Oh, but you actually get 2 decals with it. Oh, okay, that makes it a little bit easier. Like, it's that sort of mindset going into it, And again, I'm still a little bit salty that the decals weren't universal, but that's a completely different topic for a different day.
Yeah, I agree. I can agree on that front. But there's another point as well, is that it's really aesthetically displeasing when you see an orange team on the blue side or a blue-colored team on the orange side, and it's just like, like I've been very picky these past few weeks with how little details stand out, just because like obviously you kind of have to have that attention to detail. Like audio is always my thing, but from a visual standpoint, it fucking tilts the shit out of me.
Well, the little insider knowledge to that as well is that when, say, we're doing DreamHack work, we have to leave it because Smash auto designates the teams to each colour. So us as broadcasters, tournament organisers, don't actually choose what teams they go on. But whether it comes around to, let's say, Rewind's Coliseum or Rivals, I know the Summer Open's coming up for NA next weekend, essentially we get to choose, and we always try and make it as close to the logo colours or whatever that we can, purely because it is more aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah, no, again, I just feel like it would just do us a world of favour. I mean, it's not too big of an issue. It's not certainly one of the biggest topics we've covered on the show, but it is sort of like a quality of life improvement. I think that we'd only benefit from having that kind of thing in play. So, I'm all on it. I'm all in on it. I'm absolutely in on the idea of having carb colours into the matches of the RLCS and RLRS. I mean, in general, I think it's just a better thing to do. But I digress. At the end of the day, it's a small topic to cover. Thank you very much, Ham to the Keyboards, for answering the question. We're the ones answering the questions. And of course, if you want another question that you can send us to us. So, oh wow, let me try to say that again, Bacon, because I can't fucking speak today. If you have a question that you want to send to us, then you can do so via the Discord links, again in the show notes and video descriptions of every single episode of the podcast. Just join the Discord, join our little community. It's semi-active, and you can ask us a question via the Mailbag channel in the Discord link. Right. Again, not a whole lot to cover this week, so we're going to be doing a little bit of a feature. Been a while since we've done a feature, Bacon, actually. For the most part, it's just been news and results and mailbags going down the past for the past season, essentially. So nice little change of paces. We'll be talking a little bit about Rocket League expansion. I promised this last week. I said we'll be doing a little bit on Rocket League expansion as a whole. We'll be talking about a lot of different topics around the idea of how player roles work, around the calendar in general, and of course, we'll be presenting a little bit of a plan, essentially. We'll be presenting a plan of how to expand the RLCS to the point of being essentially a world-class world championship system that works for basically everybody involved in Rocket League. So that's going to be we're taking on a pretty big project here, Bacon. I think we've come out pretty good overall.
Oh yeah, definitely. We have got the whiteboards out. We've got the notepads, the pens. We've been looking at this all week, running the calculations, and I think we've come to a pretty good basis. I know me and you both have some little different viewpoints on how things differentiate, but the core basis of it is the same.
Yeah, for the most part, we are pretty decently sort of agreed on many different points and viewpoints about what we think, about how we think a Rocket League expansion should go down. But before we get to that particular plan, we're going to talk about a few different things we want to address outside of the RLCS. And this will include stuff like, you know, the LAN events and how we support the grassroots scene and the regions involved. And of course, to start things off, coaching rules, because I feel like this is actually pretty relevant. After Dreamhack, we saw a little bit of conversation going down on Twitter about the idea of bringing in a coach to the stage. Like, we talked about this a little bit on the podcast in passing. But now with the debates, it seems like it's going to come to the forefront of conversation. I think it's now a good time to revisit this one, Bacon, because I'm still of the agreement, I'm still of the idea that we should bring coaches in to sort of like to back up players Counter-Strike style, you know, to come in during, you know, in between matches and have a chat with the team and have a chat with players, and in between those that individual games of a series, they can sort of like try and coach them through, you know, work, and then they can work through various struggles or whatever's going on in terms of the series and in terms of the mentality game or, you know, team play or whatever the coach thinks is going wrong. You can come in and talk to them a little bit. It's sort of like how we do it in CSGO, sort of like how we do it in American football as well, where the coach can, you know, call a timeout and talk to his players essentially.
Yeah, essentially it is needed, because that's one big thing that we're seeing coming from Rocket League especially, is that you can get teams in a massive slump. Coaches there can really turn things around. The only exceptions that I've seen has been, unfortunately, Gregan at the recent Dreamhack Dallas. But again, that wasn't him being able to help out with the series. It had been talking about it afterwards. And the quick coach to be able to call a timeout and we're just not even talking a proper timeout. We're just a minute extension onto the break in between games is all we pretty much expect, and both teams can call one of those like a best of 5 series, maybe even a best of 7, keep it just pretty much standardized across them all, and just be able to talk to the guys. They've got to stand behind them so they can only see what their players can see, not being able to get a different view of what the other team's doing and give comms and that. And essentially they're not allowed to talk to their team during the game unless it's in those breaks, to essentially keep it on a very fair basis and keep the team's heads in order. Because I do understand the point which I think LeafX put on about how some of the teams, you know, that don't have orgs, let's take a look at, well, the Peeps, for example, moving up to RLCS next season. The Bricks do have a coach in Rams, but it's more like he's more of an analyst where he'll look over their replays and give them pointers rather than right live on that point at that point, giving them coaching advice and where to improve from, it seems. And his point was that at those LAN events, unorg teams can't pay to get a coach out there. They're just trying to pay themselves to get to the events, but that's just part of it. You can't. I think it's better to enable the top end and then it become a standardized thing, so that when orgs come in, these teams pick up the lower RLCS teams or top end RLRS teams. It's already an expected part of the game, so they'll start getting coaches involved there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I understand. Again, I see where Leaf was coming in from, but I do feel like his arguments are a little bit weak in comparison. Like, you know, he kind of settled a resolution with me. I mean, obviously, I went onto Twitter and I had my own personal arguments with him about it, and we had a bit of a back and forth debate, I think. But I just, like, you know, again, I don't feel like his arguments in particular were very sort of like justified, because at the end of the day, like, you're going to have an advantage regardless. So if you can justify the coaching role, then every single team's going to, then there's going to be, in theory, an advantage or an uneven landscape as a result. Like, I feel like that a coach overall would be a net positive for the scene, because using a coach to help unlock sort of like a team sort of play on LAN, and I feel like that would be a fantastic sort of idea. You know, like, and it'd be a fantastic sort of benefit to the top end of Rocket League. You know, take a look at PSG, for example. Like, honestly, if we inserted a decent coach, like if we inserted a fucking Shakaron or a Marky Dudar into that team, and they could come in middle of the match and like in between games 2 and 3, give them a pep talk about, give them a bit of an insight into what he's seeing from the match itself and what he's seeing from his perspective, to try and improve PSG and unlock that potential that they've got. Because, you know, a team like that are fucking amazing. You know, the problem is just they can't seem to go past the final hurdle and make a good run at LAN. And it's things like that that I think are really what the coaching rule is about. Like, the lower end teams, I understand why you want to do that, but I don't think it's going to drive them away from it if you have the system in place to accommodate them. And I think that's the one issue that Rocket League is suffering more from in terms of a coaching rule. Like, I think the coaching rule itself will not drive teams away. It's the fact that Rocket League right now is not a profitable game that will drive teams and players away from competing in this one. I don't think that a coach will give that much of an advantage. Yes, it will be an improvement, and yes, every team will want one, but it's more of a short-term improvement until people can figure out, at the end of the day, the main game is still going to remain the core, the core of the game is still going to remain the main thing that people got to focus on. A coach is just there to try and unlock the true potential in a player and a team.
Yeah, so pretty much to dumb that down, essentially a coach does not help with the team's, I would say, on-day performance. It's more setup, it's more training, it's all practice, getting ready for it, which is a coach is great there. And then pretty much when it gets to on stage, on LAN, the coach is just a glorified cheerleader. That's what it pretty much feels like. They're not going to be able to change a team's playstyle, but they can help with the morale, which is actually a very valid and very important part of the game, because we've seen it. I think the best one being back during the Cloud9 versus Dignitas finals at Season 6, where Dignitas, they badly needed a glorified cheerleader there because they were just frustrated, angry at each other. They needed someone to just come in and go, right, lads, we're absolutely fine. You just need to turn this around. Just, have a quick sip of water, get your energy levels back on, get that good mojo going again, because that's what they needed then. And where they didn't have a coach, they didn't have that presence, they couldn't turn it around.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I can't argue with that at all. Like, again, I feel like the overall the coaching rule and adding coaches to, or giving coaches a bit more of a bigger role in Rocket League will just overall it will be a net benefit. I don't think the losses that will theoretically incur would outweigh the benefit that is provably a thing essentially in Rocket League. So that's my particular take on that whole thing. I especially support it for LAN events, because it adds that extra dynamic. Again, talking about that story from the story that I brought up to I brought in a few episodes ago. We were talking about the coaching rules, that idea of a team being 3-0 down in game 7, and then the coach coming in giving a pep talk and they go for the full reverse sweep like a fucking miracle run. Imagine the stories you could create out of that. You could probably do a whole documentary about just that one sort of situation if you had a coach in place. You know what I mean? That would be fucking incredible for the product as a whole for Rocket League. But I think we've exhausted that whole topic. Let's talk about some more things we'd like to do to expand Rocket League. More LANs. This is also a non-controversial fucking topic. Let's have some more LANs, especially with the results going down this weekend at Dreamhack. We saw some real resurgences from some teams that we thought were absolutely not do shit all in this LAN event. And I think it's kind of like a case study for right, we do need more LAN events. We do need to see more on-site competitions. Stuff like your Dreamhack, stuff like your WSOEs, stuff like your, I don't know, give me another tournament, Northern Arena, for example. We want to see more shit like that because it is more prestigious, it is more exciting, it does drive bigger viewership to the Rocket League scene, not only in terms of a casual audience perspective, but also from a hardcore fan, because as a purist, you see a LAN as the definitive sort of championship. You see it as the majors essentially of Rocket League. So I think that more LANs overall would be that's the next step we need to make in terms of the calendar overall. And I'm hoping that the Epic Games acquisition tries to bring in more tournament organizers to increase the volume of events that we're actually hosting.
Yeah, and definitely, since when we look at it at the moment, a major like Dreamhack is only 100,000. We could class, a Europe-only major, so the next step down at about $50,000, and all the European teams would still go to it, no doubt. It's when you get to about the 10K point where the biggest teams probably won't bother, and you'll just get two of the biggest teams going purely because they think they can stomp it. Which is also, on that same point, we've seen some of the smaller RLRS teams and some of the bubble teams come out in spades. Just remember back to Echo Zulu during Leipzig. So it gives a whole different aspect of story there. We're not saying we want a massive number of LANs. I'd probably just say I want to stabilize out to about one LAN a month. Jay, and then have the online tournaments running alongside it. That's a good development for next year, and then we can go on from there afterwards. But it essentially is, I'm not looking for any major Dreamhack level lands, but the one step down, like I said, just maybe more region specific 50k ones, which allow some of the smaller teams to get a lot further into the lands where they don't have the top end competition. Thus, it should bring in some more orgs in that direction, you know?
Well, the way that I'd do it, and if I had control of the calendar, this is the way that I'd certainly go down it. I actually have, well, during the season, you know, let's assume that the season, with the new RLCS structure that we're about to talk about in a little bit, let's assume the new season is about 3 months running. Okay, so we've got a season of 3 months, 2 seasons a year, so 6 months out of the year, and 6 months where we have an off season. So during the off season, we'll have the way that I do it is we'd have 2 LANs a month, 1 major, 1 minor. 1 major dedicated to the big squads or the world championship teams, and a minor per region. So 1 for EU, 1 for NA that will focus on sort of like the RLRS level or the bubble scene level to allow those teams to sort of prove their opportunity, give them an opportunity to prove themselves essentially. I think potentially you could also link them into each other with a minor qualifies for the major, and the major could link back into the RLCS. There's a lot of like options you can do if you create a structure like that. That's the way that I'd do it. So that way there's like a constant stream of content coming through, because not only will you have the major and the minor LAN per month, you'd also have the qualifiers that build up to those LANs, and you'd also have the content surrounding it. Like podcasts like ours would thrive in that environment, because we could do so much activation and so much tentpole stuff. We could talk for weeks about the potential roster moves that we could see surrounding each event. We could see we could build some seriously good storylines around teams that would be competing potentially on borderline of like major and minor sort of like level, and see how they're winning all these minors, but can they make it to the major? Is that going to impact their performance in the RLCS and RLRS, etc.? There's a lot that you could do if you had that sort of structure in mind, and that's the reason why I really like the major minor system per month. I think that could work. I think that could work really, really well for something like Rocket League, where there is a lot of cross-regional sort of style, and there is sort of a very little opportunity for teams to sort of like converge in. So yeah, you do support sort of like the grassroots sort of regional stuff for having a LAN, a smaller LAN, and then building up to a larger LAN over the course of a single month.
Yeah, and definitely for me, I always say, because I brought it up before, I like the ECS style of essentially you get retained spots into the next major, so that teams have a lot of security. Again, that is the biggest thing for orgs. You got to think of it like a business, essentially. If they want to come in, pick up a Rocket League spot, they need to make sure that they're constantly getting eyes on their team, on their jerseys, on their sponsors. So having those retained spots, but then also through the minors, you get teams that haven't got a secured spot, generally the smaller teams, being able to make their way through and really show their worth. It's near enough a best of both worlds system, Yeah,
I agree with that front, and honestly, you know what? I think we could probably do a whole other topic on this particular sort of, or we could do a whole other section of this topic about how we'd structure a Rocket League calendar for over the course of a single 12-month period. But I don't think we have enough time for that today. I mean, certainly I've got a hard out because we've got Frag League coming up a little bit later on today. So I think the point being is that more LANs. We've been asking for it for ages. We want to see more LANs as the community as a whole has cried out for it about as much as we've cried out for fucking in-game items. Let's see some more of these LANs, and again, I'm hoping that the Epic Games sort of acquisition would encourage more of the open circuit to come to the fold in Rocket League. But moving on from the top tier LANs, I want to talk about grassroots esports because this is something that we do not see a lot of at all from official sort of like Psyonix events. We have seen the Renegade Cup, which we've already talked in immense depth about in previous episodes, especially at the beginning of the year, where if you looked at our Ember Series specials and our Renegade Cup final specials, you know a lot more about that than we could talk about here in the space of only a little bit. But the grassroots needs to be supported. And here's the reason why. Without the grassroots scene, we would not have any proving ground for new players to come through and do some really big stuff. Take, for example, the likes of Speed or Flakes, who, if you go back 12 months ago, they were only just starting to find their footing. Speed was only just starting to find his way into the Gfinity Elite Series squads, and Flakes was only just sort of starting to rise up into the bubble scene area and just starting to compete, in some of the smaller weeklies and shit that we had back then. And now here they are. They're on, 2 squads who are arguably among the best in the world. Speed's won a major LAN. Flakes is leading the charge for complexity back into the forefront of relevancy. And again, again, he's the guy that sort of like built up a roster and became the support pole for what was essentially a destroyed team, essentially. And this wouldn't happen if we didn't have any grassroots tournaments. And I think that the grassroots scene has been completely neglected. The bubble scene has not received the attention that it deserves. And I'm not saying put a studio in and make an RLCS for bubble scene players alone, but, give us a pathway give us a defined, consistent pathway for grassroots teams to grow, expand, and potentially become the RLCS teams of tomorrow.
Yeah, and definitely from speaking to some of the guys at Silence, they do want to get that in. We're just in a tricky situation at the moment with the Epic acquisition, where essentially things have stopped. Purely because
are we allowed to talk about the certain thing, or are we going to hold off on that one?
No,
okay,
hold off
fine.
on that one, buddy.
All right, fine.
But
sure.
essentially, yeah, things have sort of stopped, which is understandable. But I am fully on board. I can imagine Epic were willing to drop millions into Fortnite. What is to stop them suddenly just absolutely unload a whole wave of money? Because essentially that is just what it seems that Epic and Tencent do, is just throw money at things. And that isn't the worst thing, considering that Rocket League has already got a whole community, a whole system set up where they could do Magic with just absolute pennies. So being able to get the proper money into place, just look at Rocket League, what they can do, look at what Rival can do, Rewind. If they could actually have proper funding and not just near enough put every bit of money they get into a tournament, near enough making no money themselves, it would be absolutely magical. And that's what I see things going. That's where I see things going anyway. And that will essentially lead on to the third tier of Rocket League, which we'll talk about a little bit later, Jay.
Yeah, we have, of course, included the grassroots scene in our little RLCS expansion plan, so we have accounted for this, and all the points that we're talking about here will be followed up on in the RLCS, except for the LAN stuff. I mean, obviously, that's completely separate to the RLCS as a whole, but again, we'll talk about that again. I think we probably should do another feature later on down the road where we talk about our plans for the whole calendar of Rocket League, essentially how we do things. But I digress. I'm ignoring that shit. Let's move on, because we want to also, our final point before we get into that RLCS expansion theory, we're going to talk about regions, because we need more regions. I think there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of potential for different regions to enter the fold. Like, the one thing we always talk about is Asia. Asia is something that needs to be in the RLCS. We've already heard from I think it was Shice talking in Discord at one point, saying he wants to make Asia a thing this year in Rocket League. I'm not sure whether that'll be the case with the Epic acquisition, but considering that Epic are backed by Tencent, I would not be surprised if that's what they went for. I would not be surprised if they wanted to bring Asia Pro League into the RLCS. And, it's not just Asia that also requires, that also it could be a massive market to crack for Rocket League, but also I'm looking at CIS, which is also a bit of a bustling little, small sort of a region, but that has received a little bit of support. Like, there was that tournament a few months ago, which gained notoriety, or not notoriety, but it gained recognition because it was on Liquipedia and it had a Russian caster. It was all in the CIS region with Russian and Ukraine players and stuff. And honestly, I feel like that if you incorporate that a bit more, especially with CIS's standing overall in CIS is standing overall in esports as it stands. There's a lot of potential that you could see coming out of that particular region, and it seems like we have got the scene, because if I remember correctly, that tournament had 12 teams, including perfect seeds for the tournament winners, who would have been able to hold their own in that case. Was it Lacombs and Pioneer are the two players that stand out as being Russian sort of leaders in the CIS space, and I think that honestly they have the potential to potentially do some decent damage, probably not at an RLCS level, but at RLRS at least.
Yeah, definitely. And the only thing I can think of, which is a bit of a bunk to CIS, is essentially it's a region that is all fueled off of gambling sponsorships, and of course that isn't allowed by Psyonix. So if that was dropped,
why is it not allowed by Psyonix? They host 2 fucking LANs this year in fucking Vegas. It makes no sense. I understand that you want to curb match fixing, but there's better ways to do it than just completely removing gambling. That's like saying, oh, we want to remove corruption in Rocket League, therefore we're going to remove all money from Rocket League. Fucking what? No, that doesn't make any sense. Gambling is one of those things that, okay, we'll just add a 6th point right here. Yeah, gambling itself is like such a lucrative deal that you can make work for esports. So, you know, there was an article posted the other day on Twitter. I can't remember who did it, but it talked about like how gambling, like it unlocks so much potential revenue. And yes, I understand that Psyonix, you know, Rocket League is, you know, aimed towards a younger market, and certainly I would agree in that sense. But the esports side of things, like, I don't think I've seen, you know, in terms of the relevant people and the overall like demographic, like, you know, if you went to Landon, you only saw a few kids about there. You know, for the most part, it was all like pretty decent adults who, you know, had grown up at the very least mentally and could understand sort of like the concept of that. Like, you know, there were some younger ones, maybe about 16, 17 sort of age, but, you know, I think that overall there's a lot more. There is a market essentially for an older audience in Rocket League, and I think that honestly the gambling stuff, like, you know, I think that's sponsorship money that could make you fucking bank in Rocket League. You know, and again, that has also been increasing interest of its own right. You know, we talk about CIS and their increasing interest, but on Reddit a few months ago, there was someone posting that, hey, is there a place that I can make bets on Rocket League Esports? And someone also made like a fantasy betting thing where, like, you know, on the subreddit, he'd go through and you'd have like a certain number of credits and you could bet on certain matches, and then he'd update you on where your things are. And people took part in that on the subreddit. And it just shows that there is a market for this kind of thing. And with the money that you can make off gambling, if you relegate it correctly, there will be no problems. It's only a positive thing for the esports space. Again, if you regulate it properly, because I'm not going to deny that there are risks, right? You know, Counter-Strike has proven that to me time and time again. So, yes, I understand your caution, but I don't think it's like a good idea to completely outlaw it. And again, it makes no sense because you're holding lands in Vegas and the MGM Grand. Like, come on, man, come on.
And especially since, well, we know from the UK anyway, that a lot of LAN events could be unlocked in the UK purely from allowance of gambling. Purely because the only places where these LAN events could really get set up for, like, you know, we're talking a £5,000 sort of circuit would be at casinos or bingo centers, essentially, because those are the companies which are looking into esports very heavily for the whole gambling aspect, because that is just a branching out of their industry. Now, if we want to grow Rocket League, and I'd imagine the same could be said for a lot of other countries, if Rocket League wants to grow at an esports level with LANs without Psyonix's need to just, or Epic's need now to just throw money in, so it's all just very, you know, self-contained, very much self-generated, it would have to be through casinos where essentially they just say, okay, you spend £10 per player to get in. You're in the event, of course, you can play. We've got a whole setup and that for you there. We've even got like a little players training bit, whatever. And you've just got to spend money normally in our casino, because that's how they're going to generate money themselves, is by, you know, selling drinks, food, or you as adults playing. And again, the whole idea that, oh, because they're not adults they can't gamble, just you do, like, you've ever been to a bar or a pub, you just get ID'd. It's not hard to do.
Well, for gambling, for a casino, it's a bit more awkward because they have to ID you at the door. They won't let you in. So, you know, I think in terms of like, you know, hosting an event in a casino, then yeah, I understand why you want to avoid that. But in terms of sponsorship,
well, those
though,
ones
that's the
anyway,
thing.
if
like,
you've ever seen them, when those events happen, even kids under the age of 18 are allowed in. They just have you just get like a you just get a coloured wristband system. So essentially, at the door, you get stamped. So
what, for
essentially,
a casino?
I've seen at some events. Actually, no, it weren't casinos. Those were like bingo halls.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, you know,
not casinos.
I did the Grosvenor CSGO circuit, obviously, like something I'm very heavily involved in with Epic LAN, and they just straight up would not allow you to enter if you were under that age of 18. Like, you'd be blocked at the door, like, no, you're not coming in, you're not competing, you know, and that's absolutely fair in terms of the gambling, you know, in terms of the casino and gambling as a whole, like, absolutely fair enough. If you're going to host an event like that, then you should absolutely comply to the law, but there is no law stating that you can't accept gambling sponsorships. Again, it is a very safe and legal and ethical thing to do and beneficial thing to do if you do it right. That's the only thing, that's the only hurdle we have to overcome, doing it right. And I think that honestly, do you know what? That's another thing I'd probably do to try and expand the Rocket League scene, because like even if it didn't enhance the viewership, or even if it didn't enhance the viewership, which it probably could do, because if you see odds on a Cloud9 Rocket League team, and you want to be interested in what Cloud9 are doing in Rocket League, you probably be on a bookie site, see that match, and go, oh, the Rocket League gambling, let's have a look at this, and they probably would be drawn over to Rocket League. It would enhance the experience for people who are already involved, because those people with their knowledge and their own analytical breakdowns can take a look at the series and take a look at the game and be like, right, I think this team's going to win, and I'm so confident in that I'm going to stake money down. And yes, that is and that amplifies a level of fun. Essentially, that gives you a level of thrill, almost, actually. Like, it is a bit thrilling to like gamble. Like, no, I know for myself, I've been to casinos. I haven't gambled too much, but I was very heavily involved in CS:GO Lounge and skins betting. I actually used in the early days before I was a commentator. I bet skins on ESL Pro League matches, and that was very fucking thrilling, because you'd watch that match like, oh my god, are they going to win? It's 15-14. They did one good fucking round, and I've made 4.0 on the money line. No, shit like that is really fucking cool to experience. I know for myself, and obviously at Insomnia. Me and Craftman did a bit of gambling on blackjack, and it was so fucking cool to like win about 30 quid. We went in with a stake of £10, but Crafters came out £20 up, and that's such a cool fucking feeling. If you do it right and you do it responsibly, it's safe, it's fun, it's beneficial. So that's my take on gambling.
Yeah, it's always self-choice, and again, it's people that know they've got a problem with it, which should stop themselves. Because like you said, you go in with £10 and you lose that £10, you're like, all right, it's only £10 I've lost. If you go in and you just keep throwing money, that's when probably, again, in these LAN environments anyway, where you're with your friends, you'll probably stop each other, because face it, we're all nerds. We're pretty smart and sensible when it comes to that sort of thing. So it's that case of the fears are just fears, and they're outweighing what is the potential and the pros.
Absolutely. Right. Well, let's move on from that. We're going to talk now about our RLCS expansion plans. This is the big fuck off plan that I made, which has like 6 points of like breaking down in detail how it would expand the RLCS system, and also with that sub points going past those 6 points, and sub points for the sub points, and sub points for the sub points for the sub points of the single points that we have. That's how fucking detailed I've gone with this. If anyone wants to get access to this document that I've got, then feel free to throw me up a DM, because it is fucking complicated and heavily detailed. So we're gonna go through this bit by bit and try and see if we can break it down, Bacon. I've sort of come up with most of it. You've had a couple of bits that you sort of added in and out of here, and again, we've mostly kind of stuck with the same sort of structure, but we have got a couple of differing points and different bits of different issues with the system that we will call out as we go. But for the most part, this is what I think is the best way to restructure the RLCS to expand it to fit all, essentially. So, Bacon, any introductory points from you before we get started?
Not really, because again, a lot of this is basis of common sense. It's what near enough everyone wants within Rocket League, so I think we should just get cracking on.
All right then, so first point order of business. We're going to expand RLCS to 12 teams for EU and NA, at least. Now, I'm not going to say OCE and SAM just yet, because I'm not really sure if their scenes are developed enough. But for Europe and North America, I'm going to say it's definitely viable. It's definitely possible to have 12 teams. I think that the current circuit, the current system where you're either promoted or demoted, or you're promoted or you're going into promotion playoffs, it's boring now. There's the only thing you're really competing towards is the LAN event. And yeah, well, I see the argument for why you'd want to only look at the LAN event, and why it is the sort of like the prestigious thing about the RLCS. At the same time, if you take a look at any other league, there are multiple storylines going on in that league. We were taking a look at what was it? We were talking about TCS Esports League a few weeks ago, and we were talking about one of the teams there called Drive by Bricks, who are at the bottom of the table. We were like, right, everything rests on this result for them. If they cannot get this victory, everything is out of their hands, essentially. And that was one of the storylines. It was like, will they get auto-relegated, or will they be able to stay alive potentially for another season? And even the middle part of the table, it's all about, can you avoid relegation? Can you get another season in the RLCS? Can you potentially skyrocket in from the middle of the table back into the RLCS Worlds promotions, or the, into the top four, which will get you to the World Championship, essentially? Like, in a league style, it's designed so that way you have multiple threading storylines rather than just one goal and one punishment, essentially. Give me a second, Bacon. I need to sneeze. Fuck! I couldn't hit the mute button in time. Shit. Right. So the thing about it is that the reason why that's the reason why I want to see 12 teams in RLCS. So that way there's a little bit more to develop in terms of like a broadcasting side of things. There's more to offer to the product rather than just, oh, you win, you go to RLCS. You lose, you fight for your survival, essentially. It's like, well, there's a little bit of a middle ground to hold there, and some of the borderline teams can get their chance to sort of like hold another season in the RLCS as a result. You know, I feel like there's a lot more potential to work with if you have more teams in RLCS. And I understand the counter-argument, but I think that counter-argument is based in a very limited, very one-track-minded viewpoint, I think.
And just to clarify for the guys, for OC and Sam, the reason why we haven't adjusted that from being 8 teams is largely because they're run by different companies. Yes, Rocket Street are funded by Psyonix there with the 50k for their prize pool, and I don't know exactly what the case is with Gfinity over in OCE, but of course they're doing their own thing, thus they're not directly managed by Psyonix. So the adjustment could be that, unfortunately, from production costs and such, it's not worthwhile adjusting up to 12 teams. And I don't want to be harsh, but it seems like the depth isn't there just yet, because the counteract could be increasing the number of teams could help with depth. We know that more teams up in the highest level does increase the level of the lower level, because they're facing off against better teams and learning from their mistakes there. But of course, there's a lot of different things to weigh in for that area.
Yeah, for certain, I think EU and NA are capable of it, though. So that's why I'm saying 12 teams for them. Again,
EU
I think OC
would be capable
and Sam,
of 16 teams.
Yeah. I mean, well, we'll talk about that in a bit more depth when we come to our like league breakdown and how all the stages are going to be set up. I think for OC and Sam, the next step for their expansion is to have an RLRS system for them. So that way there is like a defined RLCS system. That way that's their qualification into the LAN finals, and there was also like a feeder league. So that way the lower teams can get their practice in, can get their opportunities to qualify rather than just going through an open qualifier where a single day
they need their RLRS essentially.
Yeah. Essentially, and that's going to be part of our expansion plans. You know, it's 12 teams for RLCS and EU and NA, and an RS for OCE and SAM. So the second part is to set up the path for Asia, and this is absolutely critical for this plan, because the way we're going to have Worlds working kind of relies on Asia being in play and in sort of the it has its own league essentially. We'll structure like OC and SAM, where for the first season it will just be the RLCS Asia, but it will also, in the end, also expand down to have an RLRS and our third tier league, which we'll come to in a little bit. And it has a lot of potential for Asia. We've talked about in the past how their playstyle is so different to International Rocket League, and again, it's an Asian market. Like, there's so much money to be made out of Rocket League in Asia. We have the Chinese version, which is free to play, but is also owned by Tencent, run by Tencent. They know how to market in Asia, and they know how to make Rocket League work. So having an Asian league is probably the next stage of expansion, I think, for Rocket League right now. If I was in the Psyonix camp and taking about the same sort of pace that Psyonix have been going with the RLR or the RLCS, excuse me, the next thing on the list probably would be Asia. So that's the second thing. Set up an RLCS for Asia.
Yeah, definitely. We've seen personally first-hand experience of what Asia can do. I mean, I've been working alongside the APL guys since the start, Jay. So I've been keeping a very close eye on everything. And the lads have got a good level. The problem for them is just that is APL and nothing else. And APL are putting on prize pools of like $3,000. They can't put any more because it's all coming out with near enough one guy's pocket, and he's self-funding a whole system. Of course, again, sponsorships in and all of that jazz, but it's very much they're growing because they're forced to do it themselves, not because they've got any help from outside. And this is a community that has got such great passion.
Yeah, it's all self-sufficient over in Asia right now. APL was done by the efforts of all the community organizations. They banded together for the greater good to create a $3,000 league, and it has worked, I think, honestly. I really like the way that Asia Pro League went down. I don't really like the product that they put out in terms of like the English and Japanese streams at the same time,
and Chinese. this season.
And Chinese. I mean, yeah, like I think that there's a little bit more that they could do to have like dedicated single language streams, so that we have one Japanese stream, one English stream, one Chinese stream, etc. You know, to try and to try and get APL into a bigger market and to have a bit more of a dedicated sort of product to put out. You know, I didn't really like how, you know, we were the English hosts and then we had Koken doing the Japanese casting for the English and Japanese stream. It's like it was a bit awkward the way that whole thing went down. So I think that RLCS backing could give them the resources they need to create like 3 different streams for China and for Japan and for the rest of the world that want to hear, and for the rest of mainland Asia and the rest of the world that want to hear it in English as well. So, you know, again, I think that Asia, including the RLCS, opens up a lot of options, and the scene there is very passionate. The play style is very different. Like, you know, I know that the 1 week that I did, the one thing I noticed is that Asia is hyper aggressive. Like, they are hyper aggressive when they play Rocket League. Like, even more so than South America to a certain extent. Like, the fucking shots that they take on target are clean AF, and the defensive, like, I think the only thing that could potentially rival Asia's offensive is only EU's defensive style. Like, you know, like, I'd love to see what would happen if we put Renault Vitality versus 1NE or someone like that, because like I think that could be a serious clash of styles, and I'd be really excited to see who would come out on top.
I'd imagine, say, a Renault Vitality would absolutely just sweep Asia at the moment, because of course they're in very split off regions. But OCE or SAM, I reckon that would be a good fight, just because they are of that lower quality, just slightly. Of course, the top end of OCE is very strong competition. Of course, we've seen from Renegades and Icon, but we'll talk about this later, and it's essentially that Asia needs to, just to start things off anyway, get dabbling in those other sort of B-tier continents, you know, so that they can build themselves up and then take on EU and NA, because that is how you just naturally grow things.
Well, that's the way that OCE got started, isn't it? It's the way that South America is getting started right now. Like, you know, they had their first event in WSOE, didn't quite go well as the seasons progress. I imagine South America will get represented a lot more on the RLCS stage. I think they'll make some good deep runs. We will see some world-class teams coming out from South America. Like, it is another niche region that needs expanding, like CIS, like Asia. And I'd like to see the support coming through.
South America has got a lot of funding in esports going into it, because it is that biggest growth region. CIS has already had a lot put into it in other esports, but South America is like the untapped potential across the whole of esports, purely because they're such a passionate continent. They're so competitive, and it's all ingrained into their culture, so they're perfect to get picked up for this. And of course, wages, everything like that is growing across the board, because, you know, it's one of those countries of, you got the big wage gap, of course, in there. It's the same for what can be said for India, you know, where now that that's starting to get, stabilized across country, there's so much potential to pick up esports in those countries.
Yeah, so Asia definitely needs to go in the RLCS. So those are our first 2 main points in terms of how, you know, we the first 2 things we want to change about the RLCS. Now we're going to talk about the structure. So the first thing, let's talk about the worlds. Let's talk about the regional playoffs to begin, right? So this is how you qualify for worlds. So what we're going to do is we're going to take top teams from each league, go to a mega regional playoff. And this is something I suggested a few weeks ago. I want to expand on what that means. So essentially, we'll have our European CIS playoffs, our Americas playoffs, which includes North America and South America, and our Australasia playoffs, which will include OCE and Asia. So we have the top 4 teams from each of the different leagues. So EU will have 8 going forward. I believe that, honestly, it probably would be better to have like an EU and a CIS, sort of like separate, 2 separate leagues for EU and the CIS regions. I mean, I know you disagree on that front, because CIS is already kind of included in Europe. But for the interest of fairness, because all the other mega regions have 2 separate leagues within them, and EU is the only one. I'm just saying that is an option that you could go down with the EU.
The only way I would go about changing that is that CIS could get matched in a little bit with the Middle East, because at the moment the Middle East happen to play in the Asian stuff, and the ping difference is massive. We're talking 140 ping. If there could be a bit of a Middle East and CIS combination, I would value that as a sort of second onto EU. Even throwing some of the problem is with North African population, because can you remember I can't remember the player's name. I want to say it was Itachi, where he's Moroccan, couldn't play in the EU. It's what happened back, I think it was in season 3 of RLCS, where a team, I want to say Red Eye, got dropped, and they just couldn't play because they had a player that was not from the EU region. I would love to see that as a second sort of like rest of Eurasia sort of area, you know, a sort of build up there, because there is a lot of talent, like you said. It would build it up, try it for a season, or try it in some off-season tournament. If it seems like it's not worth it, just bundle them all together under EU, because I think probably bundling them all together under EU is the best scenario, because it is such a weirdly spread out continent. You know, like the Middle East is not part of Europe, but it doesn't fit in with the servers over in Asia. It fits in better with EU. So just throw it under EU and don't worry about the name.
So 8 teams for EU, including Middle East and the rest of Europe and CIS, or 4 teams from
and
EU.
North Africa, I would argue, because you do have a couple of players from those countries, like I said, from Morocco and that, which are just allowed in.
All right, so either 8 teams from all of Europe, or 4 teams from EU and 4 teams from CIS and Eurasia. Essentially, it is the 2 avenues we could go down with this particular mega region. So the Americas playoffs, 8 teams again. North America with 4, South America with 4, and Australasia 4 teams from OCE and 4 teams from Asia. So each of those teams, they go to a separate LAN each. There's an EU LAN, an Americas LAN, and an Australasia LAN. The top 4 from each of those particular LANs will go to the World Championship, and that will be 12 teams to make it through to the World Championship. But I'm not going to go with a 12-team group stage system. Absolutely fuck that. I think it's terrible. I want to see a GSL group stage. So the bottom 4 teams from each playoff will compete in a last chance just the week before the World Championship at, you know, whatever host city. So let's say we have a World Championship in Sydney. Then the bottom 4 teams from each of the mega regions will go compete at the Gfinity arena over in Australia, and then the top 4 teams from that will be the last 4 teams that make their way into the World Championship. Or the same thing for London, they go compete in the Gfinity arena over in EU. Or if it was in Berlin, we'd get them out to the ESL studios and they'd do a last chance LAN qualifier for those bottom 12 teams essentially. That's what I'd like to see. That's what I'd like to see. That's what I'd like to see. That's the way that I'd structure the qualifying circuit. So that way you have mini LANs, sort of like you have your EU regional champions, your Americas regional champions, your Australasia regional champions. Give them a little bit of extra sort of storyline and prestige going into the World Championship, and then obviously bolster it out so there's 16 teams at the LAN. Bacon, your thoughts?
My only difference there, because it is a weird one, because essentially the B tournament, the pre-tournament, if you want to put it there, is a bit of a weird structure, especially when you're saying a week beforehand, because ideally to me, you're going to need more time to get flights or that sort of sorted, especially when you're going between 2 different lands. So maybe...
Sorry, let me clarify. The last chance tournament is the one that's the week before the World Finals. The mega region playoffs happen like at least 2-3 weeks in advance.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, to get it from there, maybe put it 2-3 weeks ahead of time, because we don't mind RLCS being a little bit of a gap between the regionals, as long as there's something, maybe a warm-up LAN, another one of these Dreamhacks in between, like what we're seeing with Dallas, you know? So they can just slot the first one of the off-season Dreamhacks in that space quite nicely, so that the top teams are all warmed up, and then you've got a bit of time to work around and set up the last little spots to land. And I like this idea. It would just be a little bit, like when we're looking at it, it's just a little bit of a faff to set up, and it would take a whole load of logistics, but we do have Epic and Tencent. Yeah. They could flog this over and use ESL system, or, you know, Faceit, know how to use it, and we've got that partnership coming in with Faceit, of course, so it's not out of the question.
Yeah, and just to stress, by the way, I have gone like no upper budget limits on this one, because Epic Games have more money than God right now, okay? They are going... I'm going to assume that Epic want to fucking back Rocket League Esports.
That's how they're rocketing at the moment,
yeah. I'm just going to assume that Epic are going to back Rocket League Esports hardcore parkour, essentially. So I'm going full hand on this one.
Just on that note, Fortnite's a bit of a failed product for esports, so it makes sense that they would try and just take what they're picking up, Rocket League, and just push that from the arguably at the moment tier 3 esport into tier 1.
Yeah, and again, that's the reason why I'm saying, right, let's just go no upper budget limit. Let's just say fuck it to the man and go in with this. So Let's go on to the World Championship itself. So, 16-team GSL group stage, 4 groups of 4. And I said this is the best system to work with. I think that Dreamhack have done this. Top eight teams move to the playoffs, so 2 from each group. The 4 teams are relegated down. That's going to be it for their World Championship run. Okay, fine. No debates from you, I don't think. I mean, we talked about this in detail.
Dreamhack instead do 2 groups of 8 with double elim, don't they?
Yeah.
I like the separation of like a round robin groups purely because it splits it up. It gives different formats for different tournaments. So this I'm actually more happy with because I do like round robin systems because it's a case of...
Mine's GSL systems, so it's double elimination.
Oh, okay. I like round robin. I will say that.
I like round robin in the context of a league. I don't like it in the context of a group stage. I think the GSL, I think the group stage need to definitively have the best results essentially. And for a 4-team GSL system, I think that sort of like definitively makes it so every match is important. Not so important that like one blunder could send you out in an instant, but enough to the point where every match needs to be taken very seriously. Like in the case of a 3-team round robin group stage, not every match has the same prestige as like a GSL group stage. And yes, it will take a bit more time because you're adding extra matches because there's elimination of decider matches in that lower bracket portion. But we'll talk about how we're going to deal with that a little bit later on when we deal with the logistical side of things. You don't sound too convinced, Bacon.
Yeah, no, just to contrast that, I would do a single round robin, but with a little bit more of a baseball aspect to it, where you have to go the full 5, like if it's a best of 5 or best of 7, you got to play the full length, and say you get a clean sweep, of course, you get an extra point if you're a winning team. Let's just say or extra games on top. Let's say you get 3 points for a win. Renault Vitality versus Triple Trouble finishes 4-1 to Renault Vitality. Renault Vitality would get 4 points. Triple Trouble will get 1. You get a point for each game played, which really then buffers up the whole of the round robin stage so that a maximum of 15 points is there. And even if you lose 3-2, you're in a better standing than just an outright loss.
Nah, I don't like that at all. I don't like that at all. I prefer to see one series victor definitively, made. Essentially, I want to see one. If you win the series, then you win the series. That's your victory gained. And I think that maybe for the World Championships, you want to use like the most sort of defined system that provably produces the best teams in the world. And GSL over the course of history, when it's used in the Global StarCraft League, for its use over the course of Dreamhacks, especially in Dreamhack Open on Counter-Strike, like they use the 4-team GSL system with 2 groups of 4, and it produces some really prestigious events, even though they are considered tier 2 events in Counter-Strike.
And it's definite results. It's
definite results. And I think that honestly, that's the focus of the World Championship. Get definitive results at any cost. Get yourself the best teams at the LAN through to the LAN finals and do it correctly. Essentially, is what I'm going to say. Now, these will be seeded based off of the based off the placements in the leagues and in the regional essentially. So each champion will get the first seed, and then the second place team will get the second seed, etc., and ending off with the bottom 4 being the teams that made it through the last chance. So there you go. That's how the group stage is going to work. The playoffs, single elimination, best of 7, Dreamhack style on crack essentially. Easy as that. No debates. Yep. Okay.
No debates.
Fair enough. All right, then. So there you go. That's our World Championship. That's how it's all going to work. I do want to ask for feedback, though. I do want to ask what you guys think at home. I'm going to take this moment to plug our Twitter at RLAfterShock. And, of course, in the Discord, we talk about these topics. So I want to know what you think. Do you think this is a good World Championship? And I also want to know what your thoughts of the rest of the RLCS system is, because we have to, of course, go through the league play system and the RLRS and the qualifying for the RLRS. So let's talk about that. So RLCS, we already talked about a little bit earlier. We want to expand it from 8 to 12 teams for EU and NA. And I want to expand RLRS from 8 to about 16 to 20 teams. You want to go to 12, about 16 teams. I want to ask you really quickly why you want to go to a lower number.
I quite like just the sameness in essentially 12, but I can see the benefit of 16 teams, because essentially what we need at the moment with Rocket League, and I reckon this is partly why you're saying up to 20 teams, is a lot more concreteness, essentially a lot more stability for that second tier, because that is one of the largest reasons why you're not seeing orgs come into Rocket League for the RLRS. It's a one and done for half the teams. and sometimes it can even be worse, when you see teams drop down and then drop out once again. So if you were to put it up to, let's just say 16, because I do quite like that number. If you put it up, again, we'll be talking about this later, so that the top half are safe, and then the bottom half have to play in some sort of regional to keep their spot or get knocked out. That would be quite happy, because then essentially you've got 8 spots that are safe, and then even more so, you've got the bottom half still being able to come into next season, because quite often with the B tier teams like the RLRS level, when you're wanting them to get picked up, it'd be on year contracts, maybe 6 months. So if we could get that up to the year-long to 2-year-long contracts, be a lot happier and a lot more stability for players.
Yeah, again, 16 I think is the great middle ground. I went 20 teams at the high end, and the main reason why I do that is because of the pyramid step structure of competitiveness in general. Like, obviously, the top teams at the top will be at the top of the pyramid, and there's very few people. You move down to the next level, and there's like a lot more teams. The next level down, there's a lot more teams than that. So you need to take into account the fact that, yes, on the lower levels, there will be a lot more players playing at that level. So there needs to be a bigger league as a result. So for the first season that this is implemented, you re-invite the teams that came bottom 4 last time, and then you take the top 8 out of 12 of the play-ins. This will be the last season we use the play-ins, by the way, because fuck the play-ins. They are atrocious. They are the worst qualifying system for any world championship in the world. So this is just literally to qualify for the RLRS and the next league down. And of course, we'll talk about that in more detail in a moment. Single round robin for the season, because there's a lot more teams. I think there's a lot more mitigation. Now, top of the league will all promote to RLCS, and then second and third will take on 11th and 10th of the second and third of RLRS take on 11th and 10th of the RLCS in the same double elimination format that we've seen. I do kind of like that format. I think it's kind of the best. I think you mentioned that you disagree with the auto promotion thing.
Yeah, I just disagree, and it should be, say, from RLCS, it should be 11th and 12th, bottom 2 get auto-relegated, and top 2 from RLRS get auto-promoted. I like a lot of movement between the leagues because, of course, again, that's a lot more to work towards. It's not just top or nothing. And then the next 2 down go into those promotion relegations. Again, I want there to be a lot of fluidity between RLCS and RLRS. Again, this sort of goes against the whole orgs coming in aspect, because of course if you're coming in trying to pick up an RLCS team, then you're going to be a bit miffed that it's easier to move down to RLRS, but the contrast being that the RLRS teams will get picked up a lot easier because there's an easier route into the bigger leagues. It's a catch sort of 22, and I, like I said, like the movement between it. I'm basing this largely off of football, where it plays out the exact same way. Heck, I could even see, so from what I said, I reckon 9th and 10th go into that playoff spot. You could even have, say, 3rd from RLRS gets into the playoff spots, and then 4th and 5th have to fight themselves for that last playoff spot. You could expand it out a little bit more competition that way, but for me, keep it simple. 3rd and 4th have to play off against, 9th and 10th, like we currently have it going on in the RLCS promotion playoffs.
Well, most of my sort of inspiration came from ESEA and their system with the ESEA Mountain Dew League and ESL Pro League. In that, back during the online season, when they ran the online season for both leagues, the bottom team ended up getting relegated, and the top team ended up getting also promoted. Because if you do that well when you're if you do that well or do that poorly in your respective leagues, then there's an argument to be made that maybe you don't deserve to be there. So yeah, that's where the automatic relegation system comes in. That way you get to reward teams for having the perfect season, like we saw this past gone season with the boys over from Veloce, and how they got absolutely screwed by the promotion playoffs despite being completely flawless for the 5 or 6 weeks prior to that. I think that's kind of unfair, to be honest, for them, and that's the reason why I want to see them get their chance, because they had the perfect season. They were definitively and undeniably the best in the RLRS, but they're not going to get the chance to compete in the RLCS and see if they can go any higher because of one day in the calendar which decided their entire fate for the next 6 months. And I think that's a very unfair system to make when you've done this much work over this entire season and it still gets shut down by 1 or 2 series. While I do like the double elimination system, I don't think it's fair in the context of one team that's definitively the best in their tier versus one team that's definitively the worst in their tier. So therefore, swap swap those two teams around. The next two from either side get to play each other off to try and get a last chance in that RLCS, in the RLCS, and that's the reason why I went for that. That's the reason why I looked at that.
Yeah, the playoffs are sort of like you get a second bite, a second opportunity to make it through. And of course, for the top teams, it's that you've got a second opportunity. Well, it's not a second opportunity to survive because, of course, you're getting pushed into it, but it's you've got to fight for your spot. And it, like we said, leads the stories. My only difference is I want top two moving up and bottom two moving down because I want more movement between the leagues, which is a fair enough point of view. But the basis is still the same for both of us.
Absolutely right. Well, let's talk about how we're going to qualify for the RLRS, because if we don't have the promotion, if we don't have the play-ins and the open qualifiers, how the fuck do you get into the RLRS? You're going franchising, Jay? Absolutely fucking not. I'm not going franchising. I've already told you I do not want that in the slightest. So, this is where we're going to go a little bit extreme on things, because we're going to go onto a completely new league. We're going to add another tier, the Rocket League Open Series, or RLOS, as we'll refer to it from here on out. This, I think we have very differing opinions on how this should work, Bacon.
I'm essentially before Jay goes on this point, I would like to see the Renegade Cups that we've already seen locked to bubble teams and essentially put on crack over an 8-week period, with the Renegade Finals being your route into it as such. But Jay, you've got the very, very outlandish opinion here, so why don't you explain it, dude?
So, this league is going to work entirely open sign-up. There are infinite spots available, and anyone can say whatever anyone can sign up and do whatever the fuck they like with it, essentially. Now, I realise that this is flawed in many, many aspects. So the reason why I've said like this is because it's designed so that way in future we can take that open system, and when we have definitive teams that are always coming out on top of the RLRS, we can add another tier in between OS and RS, so that way we have another league. So you have the open circuit, we'll have the advanced circuit, the rival series, and the championship series building in tier after tier after tier. So that way you cater for all audiences, and you cater for all skill levels and all teams that potentially want to get through to the RLCS. So we'll have this system in place so that way we can cater to everybody. We'll give the bubble scene teams a training ground to get their opportunities, and when they prove themselves, when they take those opportunities and they prove themselves in it, then that way they can, have a bit more of a defined spot in the next season when we potentially look to expand into, a fourth tier system. So 8 groups of infinite teams, essentially round robin, because we're probably going to be looking at about 1,000 teams signing up. So, we have to account for everybody. Those will all be seeded in very great detail, essentially based off of previous performances in third parties. This will get easier as we go along the seasons, because we can seed it based off their performances in the RLRS or the RLRS, essentially. And about the top third of each group will move on to the playoffs. And of course, there'll be a big fuck off, like maybe 32, 64 team playoff, which will go through the course of which will go through the course of their season. The top 8 of the playoffs for the OS take on the bottom 8 of the RLRS. Did I type that right? Did I say that? Excuse me. I'm going to say top 4. I might have fucked that up, actually. Did I fuck that up?
You're saying that top 8 from RLRS stay up, of course, and then the bottom, with the 16 structure, and then the bottom 8 of the 16 have to move down into these playoffs. So it is half and half.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, right. I got it right. Excuse me. So yeah. So yeah, So yeah, they all compete together in a top 8 and bottom 8 promotion playoffs, and essentially you'll see how that goes down. The RLRS will be qualified. Potentially might have 8 completely new teams. All teams have to compete for their fair opportunities in the RLRS system, and this will all come from the open series where this will, obviously this will be the completely open sign up teams. In theory, that means that anyone can sign up and any squad can compete in the open series if they put enough time and dedication behind it. Then they can theoretically move up to the RLRS and then the RLCS in the next couple of seasons. And that's what this whole system is designed to do. Anyone can enter, anyone can get their taste of competitive Rocket League, and if they like what they see, if they're good and they can grind their way forward, then they can potentially move in to the next tier of Rocket League. I do like the Renegade Cup system, though. I do have to say, I really enjoy that. The way that I'm going to... I will talk about this a bit more in a minute, but I do want also this to be mostly down to community organizations running this open series, essentially. I don't want to say running it per se, because I do feel like there needs to be a governing body that sort of controls everything, and that's where I think the Faceit partnership could come into the fold. This is where Faceit could possibly be the ones that run the open series, because their system essentially is designed for this kind of tournament. Their system is designed to be able to take this on. And to run this. Same thing with Smash as well. If you wanted to do this, just give the open series to the Faceit guys, and then say, look, part of the contract is that you also need to give it to the community organizations for broadcasting sake.
I love that you're going on to my point here.
All right, well,
this is essentially what I was wanting.
Go for it.
Essentially, Faceit to run it, and essentially you have got, like I said, it would be Renegade Cup on steroids. So essentially 8 weeks with 8 different Renegade Cups going on. It'd be a simple process of Friday, Saturday. You could see the qualifiers, just 2 16-spot qualifiers, and then the Sunday, just a big old tournament being put on. It's going to be 32 teams, so we could see it play out as a double elim, or we could see it just be 2 8-spot qualifiers then into a 16, which would be a lot better as a double elim, purely for timing on a Sunday. To which, by the end of it, you would get points, essentially like what the Renegade Cup does. So after 8 weeks of playing this, you would get a very fair, even across the board, points rating for the top 8 teams, which would then go into, like what Jay wanted, a promotion playoffs, which I could see that as being done. We could say a quick round robin or just single knockouts, however they want to do that. I would probably imagine you'd break it off into small groups of 4 and do double elim that way. Essentially loads of little mini promotion tournaments to allow a lot of chance there and essentially a lot of fairness, because of course naturally some teams don't fare against each other well but play better against others just due to play styles. So given that second opportunity, I always quite like anyway with double elim, but essentially it is just Renegade Cup on steroids, and it would for me be the natural progression, because we don't want Renegade Cup to essentially keep like it is now, because I personally didn't like the RLRS team inclusion into Renegade Cup. It was purely there to set the bar, but it was a bar that probably shouldn't have been set, because it's just given more prestige to the RLRS teams when it should be all about the grassroots openness.
Yeah, I have my own separate opinion on the way that the Renegade Cup works. Certainly, if you wanted to convert it into this substitute open series, then yeah, I could see that being a decent substitute for it. I forgot to mention as well that the top 8, bottom 8 RLRS promotion playoffs is going to be double elimination bracket. I completely forgot to mention that. Complete oversight on my part, but yes, that's the. I
imagine you break it, like I said, into 4 groups of 4 and do it like those are all seeded.
Yeah. That could also be another way of doing it. I was going to kind of base it off the double elimination system we have for RLRS to RLCS, but groups of 4 can also work pretty well with GSL system. Then in the top 4 the top 2 from each sort of group can qualify to the to the RLRS. But double elimination also works well. You have your options available. That's what the system is designed to do, to give you options. Right, let's do some prize pools then. So for the most part, RLCS and RLRS will remain the same. $1 million total for the RLCS, with the 500,000 being available for the lands, 250 for EU and NA, and then some sort of like sub prize pools for the other regions as well. RLRS will be $50,000 per region. This might go down to $25,000 for SAM, OCE, and Asia for their RLRSs. And the RL Open Series will be $10,000 per region. Go for it, Bacon.
I just changed this because 50,000 is basically what we currently have. If we're doubling the teams, that's lowering the prize pool overall to the top contenders. So I would probably not like to see this doubled, but probably pushed up to about 75,000 for RLRS. And like you said, do what they will with the smaller regions of SAM and OCE and Asia.
Well, the way that I see it is that I don't see any reason why we need to increase the prize pool, because there's no reason to reward the teams that came in the bottom 8 essentially. If they're up for relegation, then they don't need. Look, right, the way that I see it is that you should reward the best teams, and that's the reason why I don't like the way that the prize pool is scheduled, is set up here before the for the rival series, because the rival series you get $13,000 for placing first place in the league table, and it's like that's not even half of the $50,000 on offer. It's like, I understand you want to give teams a reward. Okay, fine, give them a small little bonus of $1,000 for qualifying. Okay, that's fine, but if a team like Veloce goes 7-0 and doesn't even get half the fucking prize pool, that's stupid. Then you need to the reason why you're competing is to be the best, and you need to be rewarded for being the best team. I don't see why this prize pool split for the rival series is a thing. Like, you should be ruling $25,000 for Veloce, about, you know, maybe 10 grand for complexity in the way that they sort of like and how they structured themselves, and just make it going in so that way the top 4, maybe the top 8, because they'll be the ones that's staying in and that'll be staying in the rival series, will get the prize pool. The bottom 8, no. They are fighting and they are competing to try and stay alive. Therefore, they will not get any prize pool. That's just the way that it should work, right? I'm a very harsh man in this case, but I don't watch Rocket League for the sake of, oh, happy-go-lucky daisies. Like, I want to see the best teams competing, and the best teams that are competing, when they do the best, they should be rewarded for being the best.
Definitely, I get that point, of course. Like I said, for me, it'd be up to 75k, and then probably the top team getting roughly 20 to 25,000 of it, so a larger split as it is. But if guys at home don't know what the current splits are, first in RLRS gets 13,000, second gets 10,000, third 7,000, 6,000, 5,000, 4,000, 3,000, 2,000. Now, it's more about just getting those places and essentially being happy and rewarded for it. But I would essentially, start off at about 25,000, 15,000, 10,000, and then start really raking it down by about 500 afterwards. So that, yes, the top team gets a very large chunk of that prize pool. That's their winnings, but it's also, you got to think, a lot smaller than RLCS. Like, the top team from RLRS is getting about the same amount of money as the last team from RLCS. The difference being there that what you're really winning is that spot into RLCS next season.
Yeah, pretty much. You know, that's the way I regard the RLRS. And then for the Open Series, a small prize pool of $10,000 per region. And this will be for, you know, obviously for the top teams that place out there. You know, if they do well in the playoffs, then yeah, they'll get the money, about $5,000 for the top placements.
Actually, can we also just state one thing, that at the moment, the one weird, confusing thing is that RLCS has stated itself as a $1 million prize pool, but that's across all regions. EU, for example, and NA themselves.
Actually, no. It's only the RLCS itself is only for the World Championship, EU, and NA, because the World Championship is $500,000, and then EU and NA are 250 grand each.
Yeah, but what I'm basically saying there is that naturally, with our increase to 12 teams, it's going to have to increase from the current $214,250. I've just looked it up on Wikipedia. To, I would imagine, about 250 each of them, just to incorporate the extra 4 teams. Of course, will be on that little bit less money, because the money they're getting now is pretty fair. It is just, you're going to have to provide money for the other 4 teams that we're bringing in.
Yeah, agreed. So, I mean, for now, $1 million, that might have to be rebalanced a little bit. I mean, maybe $1.5 million might be a bit more of an appropriate amount for the number of teams coming in. But, you know, details essentially, like, the point is that this is a basis again. Most of this is a skeleton to work off of. I've designed this so that way you can make adjustments and not affect, like, a massive portion of the league or a massive portion of the details. So that's just a rough prize pool breakdown of how we expect the whole thing to work in terms of, you know, each tier of the of the league. Let's move on to broadcasting, because this is another thing you've got to factor into when you're taking a look at this particular system. For the most part, I wouldn't change much with the Worlds, RLCS, and RLRS. Actually, no, scratch that, sorry. With Worlds, I would make a couple of adjustments. For starters, group stage, there are a lot of games to cover, and I understand that we want to get it done in a relatively short time frame, so therefore introducing a secondary stream. And that will be your B-tier casters doing, you know, guys like us doing, you know... Yeah, you know, no brainer to that. Sort of like what Dreamhack did. And I think what Dreamhack did was a really, really good step in the right direction for the broadcasting product as a whole. Yes, you will not be able to cover it in the same sort of, like, you know, quality and production depth, but you will be able to cover it regardless, and that's the bottom line. The coverage is there versus coverage that otherwise wouldn't be there because the matches are so many. Meanwhile, the mainstream does the whole analyst desk and casters and the big stuff coming through. That'll be the team that works on the playoffs, essentially. And obviously for the playoffs themselves, that'll take place in the arena, and that will have the big production shit going on.
One thing I want to see, and it's essentially, I'm going to nick it from the Blast Pro series that goes on with CS, and that's essentially that both streams are doing the main production, so the analysis desk where they'll be covering the main one, and then they could have a little throw out onto what's coming up on the B desk. But coverage the exact same for both streams, and then when it comes to commentating over that game, that's when you cut to the two sets of different casters. I think that's probably the most money efficient way to do it for RLCS at Worlds. And then of course the last day, when it comes to the single elimination knockoff, you only have one stream.
I mean, the problem with that is that you lose focus on the individual matches, because then the analyst desk has to cater for all three of the matches that that would have been broadcast.
Well, it's only two matches that they're covering.
Oh no, three.
So there's only one
Blast do 3 streams.
Yeah, but I'm just saying it's a lot easier to do with two. You know?
Yeah, that is also true, but then again, that also means that the analysts are going to be stretched quite thin, trying to focus on 2 different matches and trying to focus on doing analysis for 2 different matches. I think that honestly, just having a smaller team do a secondary stream will keep the focus there, and I think it improves the product better. So just keep them isolated from each other, and just make sure people are aware where the matches are going down on which stream and where you can watch those streams, and then we'll all be Gucci essentially for that one. For the actual seasons themselves, RLCS I wouldn't change. I would say that maybe if there's too many matches to cover, bring in RLEsports to do the secondary stream coverage like they did for the RLRS. Same thing for the RLRS this season. And for Dreamhack as well, yeah, of course. And then the Open Series is where things are going to get interesting, because there will be no official coverage coming in from studios or anything like that. And this is the way it works for most other open tournament systems. And essentially, what we do is we'd cut, and this is the reason. This is how I'd incorporate the community organizations into the Open Series. Is that whoever takes the Open Series, whether it be Face It or Smash or ESCA or whoever the fuck does it, they will be talking. Essentially, they will be bringing on community contributors, whether that be casters that will stream it, or the community organizations, especially that will also do the production stuff, like your Rival, like your Rewind. Like your Rocket League Central, like whoever, and they'll be covering whatever matches go on. There'll be a lot of matches to do, by the way. So there's a very high doubt that most of them will be covered, or there's a very high doubt that a lot of them will be that will be streamed, just because of the sheer volume of teams involved. But at the end of the day, with the Open Series, you don't need to stream every single team. Like if there's a team that wants their matches streamed, like let's say for example, Endpoint picks up a squad. Like Endpoint have their own Twitch channel, so they can partner up with the Open Series and they can say, look, can we get the exclusive rights to broadcast our own matches? And you can say yes, and that way Endpoint fans can watch and Endpoint fans can see Endpoint play on the Endpoint channel. And the same thing could be said for any other organization team. Meanwhile, if you want to get official casters doing a community stream, essentially they can be the ones that take the brunt of the playoffs. They can be the ones that take the brunt of all the big matches. So if there's any notable squads that are competing in the Open Series, like maybe a team's relegated from RLRS that you didn't expect them to be there, then suddenly that's a bit of name value, and that means that the community organizations can follow those guys. They can do the matches that they want to do, and they can do the matches that they can do the matches that are appropriate over the course of the season. It's a bit more selective. There's no real requirements to broadcast anything, but just again, that's the nature of the beast. That's the belly of the beast when it comes to the Open Series, because there will be way too many fucking matches to cover. And to be honest, that's absolutely fine. We do it a lot in Counter-Strike. With Open Qualifiers, a lot of the matches go completely unstreamed. But again, that's the way it works, because it's completely open sign-up.
Well, it's currently what we're doing with the Dreamhack Pro Circuit, for its qualifiers. Essentially, just take that and move it across.
Yeah, exactly.
One thing I would like to see, and it's going to be sounding pretty weird, it's like just randomers, more like streaming personalities probably get a little bit of rights there, just for more of like a casual audience that want to see that. So maybe only 2... I'm going to say pro community, like broadcast teams like Rival, Rocket Baguette, whatever, get that. Then you'd have the teams allowed to broadcast themselves, and then maybe have one chill stream as such, where it is just a personality. Let's say in NA you would be Athena, over here in EU. I'm trying to think with the personalities that don't do the games themselves. So maybe if Shogun's not involved in it, like he might just do it on his own channel, for example, where it's more designed for people that just want to chill and talk and take it in that way. I would like that sort of variety, between the different streams.
Yeah. Again, I can't. Again, those are the ideas when it rolls around to broadcasting. At the end of the day, it's very open circuit. It's very open for anyone to come in and sort of do things, so long as you're not going to be like, so long as you're not going to do something absolutely absurd on streaming. Like, of course, you've got to impose some broadcast rules, but for the most part, just leave the community to their own devices and leave the community to make the best out of the situation they've been given, and give them to make the best out of everything like this. And give them the chance to prove themselves. It gives an opportunity for upcoming casters to get experience doing some of the stuff from the Rocket League circuit, and it gives an opportunity for it gives an opportunity for production staff and people to sort of like make their names known via the RLCS circuit. So it's something that works for everyone, I think. And again, that's the main thing I wanted to accomplish with this system, a system that works for everyone. And I think it kind of works for as many people as we can possibly cover. I can only think of...
it's already shown its sort of like workings, essentially, within the EU community itself. Just take Tractor, for example. There's not many broadcasters in EU. He was just covering some of the original Leipzig stuff and then got brought out to do the work at Leipzig. And it does show that it does help with the whole progression into a more professional career is by having these grassroots levels.
And for casters as well, with Dallas obviously bringing in the likes of Audible Dads and Fickle Platypus, like those guys being the three guys on the B stream, and it's like, yeah, that proves that this system with the Open Series works in terms of community development, not just from a team perspective, but also from a broadcasting perspective. And I think people kind of underestimate how important broadcasting is, because that's how you make the money. So to not only train up the next level of professionals, but also to train up the next generation of commentators and broadcasting specialists. Like, that's also just as important as well. So that's why I added a section for broadcasting.
That is why Psyonix wants every game broadcasted, is because that is what is getting the money. So it makes sense. Like, people have a go at it, just saying, why don't you change up the system? The system is designed around it. But let's actually expand that system and bring in a second stream to make it just flow a lot nicer.
Indeed. Okay, well, I think that's about everything we've covered on terms of our RLCS expansion. Fucking hell, it's taken up most of the goddamn show.
Yeah.
Is there any final points we want to talk about in terms of these plans, and any sort of things we want to address, or anything else that we want to talk about in regards to this big fucking section?
No, I think we just need to get on to Dallas, because it's looming.
Yeah, we are like dead out of time. So let's talk about Dallas. Of course, I do want to encourage that you also get involved with this particular thing. If you do want to get details of the plans, if you do want to see the document that we have working off of here, and specifically like how we're going to structure and how we would structure this particular circuit, then do feel free to message me on the Discord. Join the Discord and discuss it, and tweet us at RLAfterShock on Twitter, so you can get involved with the podcast and talk more about this particular topic. Right, let's move on to our tournament roundup. Dreamhack Pro Circuit. Holy fuck, I've been waiting for this event for so long, Bacon. Like, Leipzig was off the chain. It was amazing. I don't think a whole lot of tournaments could live up to that particular hype, unfortunately, and I don't think that Dallas kind of did, for a couple of different reasons. I mean, there were some teething periods on the first day, and that was in part because the team was spread across like a lot of different things. Like, I know that the main casters for the second stream without doing the collegiate stuff at DreamHack at the time, and there was some technical production issues.
Day 2 was so much better, and it does just show. Again, like you said, where they were spread across the collegiate stuff, just maybe getting an extra pair. That's why at the initial, the talent announcement, you saw it was Vodable, Fickle Platypus, and Daz. And then, of course, they brought in Grizzly and Lando to help out. And it's that sort of case of, maybe they didn't realize ahead of time how big the beast would be for the B stream. But as a community, we are so grateful for it. And a big shout out to D-Pants and CJ for getting that all set up, because they are pretty much stepping into the lines which Sonics don't want to do in their own ones. Like, they're too cautious to do, whereas these lads with Dreamhack are bringing in what the Rocket League community needs.
Yeah, I mean, they're willing to take a risk, and I think in this case, while there were teething issues and there were criticism to take away, I think that overall, like you say, day 2, no problems. All the teething issues were done by the end of the first day, and that's, that's like not a whole lot of production companies can do that.
And that means when we get around to Valencia, it's going to be there straight from the get-go. Yeah. You have to just realize that your first time around for anything is going to be a mess, and then when the second time gets a little bit better, third time gets even better, and then you just build it up to a strong point.
Yeah, and the main two criticisms I'd say is that the production quality for the B stream wasn't great. I don't think it was amazing, but it was a B stream. Yeah, it felt like it was tacked on, but again, I feel like that these are teething issues that will be sorted out by Valencia when the time rolls around. The other thing I'd also say is switching between matches, in the middle of a match. Like, we've already proven with WSOE that doesn't work, so let's not do that next time. And again, keep the focus down to one match at a time and focus test it and make sure that everything is fucking, sorted essentially. So those are the only two things I'd say.
That for Valencia. They've already realised that.
I absolutely trust that D-Pants and CJ will know exactly what they're doing for Valencia. So again, not the best pro circuit, but Dallas still produced some interesting results, produced some interesting content, and also produced some very interesting storylines. We're going to talk about a few of those because as standard, the pro circuit had 32 teams competing, of which we had a top 8 and a champion crowned in Cloud9. To go through some of, you can take a look at the Liquipedia stuff. If I went through every fucking result, we'd be here for the next 10 minutes, so I'm not going to do that.
The playoffs, the last top 8. I think that's the good
so the
point
top eight, we had 5 out of 8 teams from Europe competing in this one. Dignitas taking on NRG, Cloud9 taking on Complexity, TSM taking on Mousesports, and FC Barcelona taking on Evil Geniuses. That ended up with the semi-finals of Dignitas versus C9, Solar Mid versus EG, in the grand finals where Cloud9 beat Solar Mid 4-2 to become the championship here at Dallas. And that is how the playoff breakdown worked up. So we'll talk about EU's performance at LAN in general. Obviously, we're an EU podcast, so let's talk a little bit more about how EU kind of did. And I think we did all right. 5 out of 8 in the playoffs, certainly a majority sort of thing. We didn't quite win the championship, but we also did have pretty good representation overall. Considering it was a North American LAN, there was a lot more North American teams here. The fact that we still stood out above them, I think that's a pretty good win for Europe.
My problem is that's expected by now with EU.
Yeah.
5 out of 8 coming in. If it was half of the teams in EU, I'd be like, could have done a little bit better, lads.
Yeah.
5 out of 8 just seems pretty normal. 6 out of 8 would be pushing it, of course. And it all comes down to seeding. It was seeded fairly well. I've got no, because of course the way they seed it, naturally they've got to put the teams that qualified and had the invited spots as top 8, and then afterwards they get thrown in under. So it can throw off the seeding a little bit there, but otherwise it's not a problem. The only point to that being that, say, from Group A on the first day, you had Vitality, Mousesports, Method, Solar Mid, and Space Station. B had NRG, EEG, Splice, Dignitas, Renegades there. So some of the groups were a little heavier than others, but that is just how it is, because at the end of the day, you can even see some of the bubble teams come through and make it into day 2, so you got to commend them for that, and it's just what it is at the end of the day.
Yeah, with the pro circuit, I feel like it's a bit too open for my tastes. There's a lot of teams here that you take a look and it's like, okay, well, day 1's results are pretty expected. Day 2's results are also, relatively kind of expected. There are a couple of outliers here and there, which of course we will call out as we go down the line. I do think that at this stage, however, the pro circuit format has already kind of exhausted itself a little bit. I understand the idea that you want to get all the best teams in, but a lot of the matches went the way that you would predict them to, especially when you take a look at the bubble scene teams versus the RLCS teams, and it's like, expected. Clappage getting 3-0. Clappage getting clapped by Solar Mid. Yeah, who's surprised at that? Method 3-0 Beatbop. Yep, sounds about right. 303 going out 6-1 essentially in their double elimination bracket. Yeah, seems legit there. And I feel like maybe the pro circuit might be better to be more limited, but I think we'll talk about that at the end of the season when the final pro circuit is coming to a conclusion, because there is a bit more to talk about in depth with that particular topic, and I feel like it does need a bit of revision. But for the final, since we've been promised 4 events of this format, it's only right that Dreamhack fulfill those requirements and do the final 2 events on this format essentially.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And it is just minor tweaks we want to see. But those guys will know them already. They're committed to a format because they would have to plan this months in advance. So it's that case of no change is going to happen now, so there's no point in bringing it up. After the 4th one, which is Montreal, that's when you can start talking and looking to next year for when they come back and revisit it.
Indeed. So yeah, EU doing well as usual. Let's talk about TSM though, because they were the ones that represented us in the finals. And of course they did lose the finals, unfortunately, but I digress. Cloud9 is still a pretty good team. And do you know what? I didn't expect to see them here, to be honest. I'm kind of surprised. I'm very, very surprised to see TSM here in the finals, considering where they stood at the end of the league play season, going out last place in the regional playoffs. They did have a good time though. They had a pretty solid set of victories and a pretty solid set of results for the course of their group stage run. The one that stands out to me the most is the 3-2 against NRG. They always came out on top. They always were able to hold their own, even beating Space Station pretty confidently of their own right on day 1. They always had an upper bracket finish in their group stage.
Yeah, for me, this pretty much just shows the whole proof in the pudding of why EU with the RLCS format needs expansion, because even Dignitas got up to those semi-finals as well. It just showed that league play did not run so well for these teams, but then with the other tournaments, they can pull it off. But definitely these are two teams that have good experiences on LAN. And so coming down to it, TSM just really showed their true colours here, getting all the way to the finals. And again, this is them showing that they had a bit of a sloppy league play, but able to pull it back now. So next time RLCS rolls around next season, we should be quite happy for them to get back up to the top.
Well, honestly, I was going to make the kind of a different point entirely with TSM and Dignitas, and the idea that maybe the whole LAN thing we were talking about earlier, maybe this is a case study for even more LANs to come to the fold, because, well, yeah, they had a pretty poor online season, but the LAN events, they both made it into the semi-finals at the very least. In the case of TSM, they made it all the way to the final stage, and this is after the back of a very, very poor set of results in the league season, a very, very poor ending at the end of the regional playoffs. You know, and these are all the all online things versus the other thing, which is this is a completely entirely LAN environment. There's no online matches being played, and still they thrive, which, you know, kind of emphasizes the point that online versus LAN, they are two completely different things. Like, they are not the same at all. And at the end result is that, on any given day, a LAN team could very easily, an online team could very easily crumble under the pressure of LAN. We've seen it so many times in the past, and we could also see an online team that's sort of like struggling turn up and perform at the LAN event, like we're seeing with TSM and Dignitas. And
well, the opposite to that is Vitality over the weekend. I can remember seeing a few tweets from, like I said, Gregan, where this was the biggest reason, and from Scrubkiller, that's why I brought it up. They want that coach on there, because at LAN, they could not get their mindset in order.
Yeah.
And so that shows that Vitality, which we thought was so good after league play, could crumble at RLCS LAN. Good thing that Dreamhack is here. Like I said, you always want a major before your premier event out of Worlds, purely so that teams can get that quick warm-up in. Because you got to think, RLCS in New Jersey is just over 2 weeks away. It's 2 weeks from this Sunday. So, of course, getting that in last week, so they've got 3 weeks to essentially boot camp it out and make sure that they're prepared. I know the European teams are definitely back home, but they'll be going back with a week of boot camp anyway, and they can take what they've learned from Dallas to LAN.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. The thing, let's move on to Roundup Vitality. Let's move on to Roundup Vitality for a little minute and talk about their performance. Because obviously,
can we just point out as well, with the top 8 there, only 3 of them are actually going to New Jersey.
Really?
Yep, Barcelona, Cloud9, and NRG. Complexity have only just got relegated. Dignitas didn't make it. Solo Mid didn't make it. Like I said, Complexity just got promoted, and EG just got demoted. Mouse Sports just got demoted as well.
Shit, you are right, actually. I'm just verifying that.
Only
God,
Barca, Cloud9, and NRG.
Again, we need more LAN events. I mean, all these kind of points talk about the whole thing and kind of like, sort of like bring that whole conversation to the forefront. But yeah, let's talk a bit more about FC, but not FC Barcelona. We'll move on to those guys in a second. But Team Vitality, because Vitality, they had a very, very poor performance this LAN event, and maybe it is a mentality game and does kind of like bring up to the idea of coaching, because this was, for our money, the best team in all of Europe. They smashed it out of the park in the online season. They smashed it out of the gate during the playoffs. They had absolutely no troubles with the exception of one loss to Triple Trouble, and that was about it. And now here they stand, barely losing to Mouse Sports, barely taking a victory above fucking Yo in the first day. And in the second day, they got dicked down by NRG, which is expectable or understandable. But between the series between them and the Complexity side, they only scored one single goal in the entire 6 games they played between them and Complexity. Complexity still had a good run. They had a pretty decent run of their own right, but just Renault Vitality, you can't take it away from the fact that this was a very, very poor showing from them. Very one-sided goal, very one-sided series, virtually no goals being scored by them. This was a terrible, terrible run.
Yeah, and again, it's a weird one. It's got to be all about the mental on LAN, because the only LAN this team has sort of done together has been Leipzig. Before that, it was a completely different roster. Naturally, because that would have been back when Freaky, I think, was on the team. So that would have been Pashy, Freaky, and Fairy Peak. The only one still remaining from that is Fairy Peak, who's now playing with K-Dop, who it's been a long time since those two have played together at a LAN, and of course they've got Scrub Killer, who I think this was Leipzig was his first LAN, wasn't it? So they've still got to develop that LAN essence to them, but again, it'll take time. And again, this is one of those things where coaches do come in with a lot of help, because you could see it, they were getting frustrated and they needed that help there. So Vitality, again, is one of those. Vitality throw a lot of money into their teams. They're looking to become one of the big ones. Like they're on track and path to be the next TSM Cloud9 as an org. So they're putting a lot into their team here, and they will try and promote to Psyonix, right, we want Gregan on that stage to help them out, because that's what they need to be the best, and we want them to be the best. And hopefully that'll be one change, because remember, Dreamhack is not Psyonix, so they could put their own rulings in for Valencia and Montreal to allow coaches onto the stage.
Yeah, and I think that, honestly, an organization like that doing making a rule like that possibly could change the landscape entirely, but we'll have to find out whether they actually will do that, or whether they want to stick with Psyonix. I don't know, honestly, I don't really know what the dealing is with Psyonix, because they do sponsor the event itself, but I don't think they run. Obviously, they don't run it because CJ and D-Pans are doing it. But I'm not sure if they impose that rule, whether they encourage the idea that, you know, you have to go by the RLCS rule set. I'm not really sure how it works for them, but we'll have to see whether it does end up turning around for Dreamhack, or whether they will actually end up turning things about, or try and change things up for the next Valencia LAN, or whether they'll change it up for RLCS in general. Again, we've expressed our opinions on what we think of the coaching rule as it stands at the moment. So, yeah, let's just move on, I think. Let's talk about FCB. Because they did all right. Despite the issues that the top teams were having especially like Renault Vitality, and with the issues that they were having, FC Barcelona had a pretty confident run right up until their playoff bracket. In fact, they didn't lose a single game in the entire group stage. They beat Complexity 3-0, Icon 3-0, the Peeps 3-0, Advanced Gaming 3-0, and eventually they lost to Evil Geniuses, who of course had a pretty decent series of their own way. You know, they were one of the teams that got relegated, and they still rose up and did some really, really impressive stuff over the course of this LAN event. But FC Barcelona still looking like hot shit. They are looking amazing right now. I still think that, you know, that this one result doesn't mean much in comparison to their run in the whole tournament as it stands, because, like, again, not dropping a single game prior to the playoffs, that's insane.
Yeah, for me, this is one of the other bits of proof that I reckon Barca will go on and win in New Jersey, and it was simply because, and we know this team, they got way too cocky for their own good, you know? And again, without coach there to readjust them on pitch, they weren't able to do it. Don't get me wrong, EG, all credit to them, because they came in absolutely swinging, and really impressed with EG, because, of course, a lot of people are worried about maybe the org will pick up a different team, pick up one of the RLCS teams that just got picked up, you know, because they have moved down to RLRS. So a performance like this is great for them, and really I can't wait to see more from those lads, especially since EG are now confirmed, because they made it into the semi-finals to get that invited spot to Valencia. So their org would pretty much be dumb to drop them before the next season, you know, and pick up one of the other teams. Barca, I reckon they need this as a knockdown for them to pick themselves up and get ready for the next LAN, which is good, because I've even said that with Vitality. You know, I reckon this is great for them to lose at this point, because it means they're not going to be overconfident and they know what they need to work on, because it was a poor performance from Vitality, and Barca had this like weird brilliant, and then just flat on their face.
Yeah, I wonder what it would have been like if FCB did face off against Renault Vitality in that Group B match of the second day. Like, you know, there's potential that could have happened, I think, if FCB had choked in that Complexity matchup. But, you know, I think that certainly would have proven the point of how far Vitality really fell, because that's the one team they've like never lost to over the course of their existence together as the three-man units that they are. So that certainly would have been a decent measuring stick to see how far Renault Vitality, how poorly they did at this LAN. But that's a reality for another time. We'll see whether they can try and replicate the same performance over at the World Finals. But yeah, for FCB, I think this is going to form them. I think it's going to forge them in fire as they get ready for New Jersey. The LAN Finals coming up very soon for RLCS. So keep your eyes out for that, boys. Let's move on to Mouse Sports next. We have given them so much shit the last few months, man. Like, I feel bad for Mouse Sports, like, because we've been saying it's over and over, and I don't mean to be a dick about it.
It's deserved. though.
No, it is deserved. It's absolutely right. They have been a team in very dire straits. You know, I said it on Twitter. They are in dire straits. They were in dire straits on the relegation. They may have been up for losing their organisation, and they brought in Speed to come and sub in for this particular tournament. And Mousesports made a run. I thought it was great that they made it to day 2. I wasn't too sure if I was expecting it, like especially because they were in the same sort of like thread as Renault Vitality on the Group A stage. But no, they beat Vitality 3-2. It was a hard-fought battle. Then they went forward upper bracket and just beat out Rogue to eliminate them from the second-day group stage. And they almost beat Team Solo Mid. They came within one game before the reverse sweep came from the TSM. And Mousesports, this is looking infinitely better than what they were doing throughout the course of the RLCS season during the relegation playoffs. You know, they were, as I say, in dire straits. But for me, this brings up another question about about the guy that they brought in, Speed. You know, we've been saying he's a really good player. His acquisition for Flipside, or the Bricks now, was obviously something that catapulted them over to the victory at WSOE. But since then, the Bricks have slowed down. Now he's moved on to subbing for Mousesports for this one-round event, and now he's turned Mousesports into a top 8 team for this event. And I got a question, like, you know, is his acquisition and his talent the boost that gives teams a ton of short-term success but very little long-term, you know, improvement?
Yeah, because we were talking about this before the podcast started, guys, and it was essentially, is Speed going to be the first lad where you see him jump between teams every 3 months, where teams suddenly go into a little bit of a slump, they bring him in, and then they get pulled up? It's a weird case, and we were looking about this as well, because we look at Mousesports with that performance, and we still don't expect Speed to jump over the Mousesports, purely because Bricks are in RLCS next season, Mousesports are going to be in RLRS. Even if they offer him a contract, it's going to be in a worse league. Admittedly, it is with secured money, but at the moment, where it is RLCS or nothing, the promise of, you know, getting well placed in Dreamhacks and stuff is not enticing enough for this lad. And it's a weird old case.
Yeah, I mean, it is weird because although Speed was looking like a much lesser tier player during the course of the season with the Bricks, like in Mousesports, he looked like he was in his element. You know, there was a couple of whiff touches here and there. I still think he's in his slump level, but it looked better. It looked like he was coming out of that slump essentially when he was in the Mousesports side, and that does bring up some questions, I think, for Speed in his current placement in the RLC, in the Rocket League scene as a whole. Because the only time we've seen him be a consistent star player was when he was part of Red Reserve and Triple Trouble. Ever since then, team hopping, going in, being an instant improvement, but then a long-term sort of like, you know, very, very big, what's the word? Depreciation. I think his sort of like talent and his value to the team depreciates over time when, you know, that short-term success is really the main thing that he sort of offers to teams, and, you know, that's not a very healthy sort of mindset. It depends on team
structure though, definitely, because like when I look at how Speed plays, Flipside was a very weird fit for him, and he purely joined onto it because he had to. They made it through, and they're absolutely. It made complete sense. If I look at Speed right now, what team would he want in the RLCS to go and play for? It would essentially be to replace Turbo on Dignitas. I think that could turn them back into a top tier team, and top tier is in top 4. But why would Dignitas give up one of their golden boys? It's what the most iconic player essentially in the whole of Rocket League, Turbo Pulsar. It would make no sense to get rid of him this season anyway, because of course they're going to, I'd imagine, continue the same squad into next season and then see how it goes from there. So it puts Speeder in an awkward spot of he is stuck at the Bricks, but he could do better elsewhere.
Well, my big but was more along the lines of how long will it bring success to Dignitas? Like, will it just get them the one championship and then fall immediately back into the slump? Like, that's not the thing. I don't think Dignitas want that, you know, as the team and the organization themselves. You know, I don't think that they're, that they want just to have like one championship and then to fall back into their slump. Like, you know, that's not the way Dignitas roll.
Want you to be consistently top 4 rather than, you'll win one and then do nothing for a few months and then come win another one. Do nothing for a few months. They prefer consistency and you continuously in the limelight instead of, the wild card coming out of the blue. It's just how it is.
Yeah, and I think that will cause some problems for Speed in terms of his stance overall, because he seems to be that wildcard element rather than being the long-term improvement for a team. And if he does go into a team like Dignitas, I think it's going to be that one move that gets them a championship again. But after that, they're going to fall back into the darkness. They're going to be down to relegation levels of a performance once again. And I don't think that's going to be a healthy move and mindset. I don't think it's healthy for Speed either. I feel like his real sort of peak form was when he was being part of the unit with Tadpole and Ronicky, and that's part of the reason why I look at history and I wish we didn't go down the path that we did right now, because with the way the Triple Trouble have worked up, I honestly feel like Speed could fit into Cassio's shoes so well, and I think if they worked on themselves, that they could be in another World Championship final with potentially us looking at them to win the whole damn thing. I feel like that could be the level of history we walked down. I mean, there's no guarantee that that'll be the case, because at the end of the day, a new player being subbed in on a 3-man roster in place of another player obviously doesn't guarantee the idea that you replicate the same results. But I could see it being a plausibility. Honestly, I could have seen it being a possibility back when they were without Cassio and they were with Speed instead of the Triple Trouble side. And I think that long term, Speed really missed out because he took the deal to try go to flip side. He got that early championship, but I don't know if he keeps hopping around teams and can't find a good home, and he can't find a good place to settle down and sort of buckle up and try and work towards a championship and keeps team hopping, then it won't end up working out for him in the long term.
I could actually see Speed doing really good moving over to one of the NA teams. No lie. I could see him really fitting in with Rogue or Space Station Gaming, which are just that one step below top class, over on that end, and being able to mix up their style so much that it could really throw off some of the top tier teams and bring a whole new element to NA. So, I mean, that is just all speculation. The same you could say with Ghost, who have had a bit of a better season but still not hit their stride. I could see him fit in a lot better over there purely because there'd be an even bigger boost,
Yeah, agreed. Again, it's all punditry at this stage. We don't really know what's going to happen until the cards fall where they do. But this is what I suspect is going to happen. I suspect that Speed... Probably, I suspect there's a chance he'll jump to Mouse Sports for the sake of the salary and potentially to try and boost them back into the RLRS. But I think if they do make it to the RLCS, then that's probably about as far as that roster will go, and Speed will jump to another team. And again, not a healthy mindset when you're just jumping in and out of every single team. They see your strength, they see your weaknesses, and eventually no one wants to play with you because you have the curse of just being in the revolving door, essentially, the revolving door player that goes in for a bit, then comes back out and goes for another door, essentially.
It's hard to build up alliances there.
Exactly.
I get that. I think he's got one more transfer in him and still be acceptable as such. And then if he did it again after that, there would be very little trust with him, and he'd be seen as just that revolving player. But he's a good fucking player, so allow.
I think one more transfer, but after that he's got to settle in. He's got to try and find some consistency. He's got to try and find find a good
Bricks
home.
Could solidify themselves. They've shown they can get great results. It was just a very, very shaky season.
Indeed. Well, let's move on from Mouse Sports, talk about Method, another team in the RLRS. Who had a pretty good run. They made it to day 2. Didn't make it to the playoffs, unfortunately, but they did come up against Dignitas in their first round match, so that's fair enough. And they also lost to Evil Geniuses, who also made a run to the semis, so that's also fair enough. Kind of drawing the short straw on that one, but it was kind of a question whether or not the RLRS and bubble scene teams from EU would be able to do anything good in the context of this bracket, and they did do something pretty good. Actually, in the first round, in the first round of group stage, they beat our one bubble team called Beatbop, and they also beat Space Station, who are, like you say, one of these teams on the rise through the North American RLCS tier. So yeah, Method starting to look like they are a pretty decent, a little bit of potential. I don't say it's like completely built and bolstered. I still see some issues in Rix and Burrito and their current, their duo. I'm not sure how much Astral's fixing that because I didn't get to watch much of Method this weekend. But either way, still a great result that does prove that Method have a little bit of fight left in them.
Yeah, Method have done better than what you expect. Like I said, the tournament's stacked with how it's seeded. So they were in one of the unlucky ones where they had 5 teams, and looking at that, how they're seeded and where you would expect them to come out, they're probably one of the weaker teams out of that lot, out of the 5, and yet they still get through day 1. So they're already doing better than what I would expect just looking at paper. Like I said, Space Station Gaming are a top half NA side. They didn't get to LAN, I know, but they're taking down RLCS teams, and this is a newly formed side. Remember Astral coming in. So, all credit to them going into next season. I think it's going to be good for Method. Astral is a big improvement to that side. We said it, I think, last week, and as long as they can keep playing with him, I mean, I would hope they'd be going to him with him to Valencia. Let's just see how this team grows, because Method, I really want, because it's such a long-standing org within Rocket League, I want them to come back into the limelight.
I mean, I can agree with you in terms of the storyline aspect of Method's sort of history. I'm just not sure about the team just yet, you know. I mean, in Europe is a different beast than North America. You know, they're definitely different play styles. So there is also that factor to take into account when you take a look at Method versus the Space Station side. I do believe that match was not streamed either, so we can't actually take a look at the specifics till we take a look at the demos. At least not to my knowledge anyway. I mean, I didn't get to watch this match particularly as it stands. So, you know, for the time being, I'm still going to be a bit skeptical about how Method do, because it is only one good result. You know, the other matches were also expected losses or beating out bubble scene teams, which, yes, you expect that to be coming in from an RLRS squad. For next season, I still have my eyes on Method to see what they can do, but I'm not gonna bank on anything just yet. I'm not going to say, right, they're definitely going to do well this season, because that's what we said this last season, and obviously that didn't go the way that we expected it would. So I'm going to keep my eyes on this one. I'm not going to make any bets until I know more about Method. So let's move on to PSG, another team that we've talked about a ton over the last few months, because they've just got so much talent, Bacon, but they can't get it done. I feel so broken inside. Yeah. I feel so broken inside whenever I see PSG at LAN, because it's just like they had such a good run on the first day. They beat Rogue 3-0. They absolutely destroyed Rogue. They did fantastic against Rogue. It was like, okay, maybe they're over the LAN jitters, maybe they're over the LAN issues, but then they go straight in on day 2, 3-0'd by Complexity, 3-0'd by Icon. Oh man, why? Come on, I really, really want to see PSG do so well. Okay, this is the main team I focus on when I talk about having a coach involved in the series and in the LAN event itself, because PSG, if they had a coach in, for example, like we talked about the idea of them getting constant league play in the Gfinity Elite Series. Obviously, Gfinity Elite Series isn't on at the moment, so we can't really do that. The other thing I'd say, let's have that coaching rule in. Let's unlock the potential of this team, because this is one of the very few teams I can say I cannot change an element about it without ruining what the complexion that they already have right now. There's other teams that I can say, you need to make this move, you need to make that move, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to try and change up this, you need to try and fix that, maybe you might want to swap this player out for a different type of player. We could do that all day with so many teams. PSG is one of the few where I would not touch a single thing about it. You just need to unlock their potential, because there is so much talent in this roster, and it's breaking my fucking heart. I want to see them succeed so bad, and oh man, like such a good online team. They've shown so much over the course of the season. They're going to Worlds, they're coming here obviously, but they just couldn't get it done. And I'm just so upset about that, man. Every time we repeat the same conversations over and over again for PSG, and it's not even their fault is the worst part about it, because if they had that coaching rule in, again, I feel like this is one of the teams that would benefit from that coaching rule, that would benefit from someone standing behind them, talking every 60 seconds, in every 60-second break to try and figure things out and try and guide them through a series. This PSG side can win championships. It's just that small little thing, that one thing that's getting in the back of their heads that's completely destroying them on LAN.
Yep, it definitely is. I think it is a morale problem with PSG. Considering that Frio lost the Complexity, they did not get a single goal.
Oh.
And yeah, it's one of those. I really wanted PSG to just make top 8. That's all I wanted from them, because when you look back to the brackets, it was harsh. Don't get me wrong. PSG losing Complexity was playing nuts. Fair enough, they moved down, but should have not lost Frio to Icon. They should have gone on further, and then, yes, they would have been stuck with NRG, which I would not expect them to win. And that drop, we would have been like, okay, that's fair. They lose 3-1 against NRG. That's fair enough to me. But losing to Icon is, for me, it's going to sound harsh to a lot of the OCE guys, but you stack everything up on paper, PSG should be winning that 3-0, not getting beaten 3-0. Really, you'd most likely expect a 3-1 from previous results. But even then, the matches, the games in that Icon series was 3-2 to Icon, 1-0 to Icon, then 2-1 to Icon. So don't get me wrong, 1-goal differentials, but still to get stopped out. PSG had a very, very awkward day two, because when we compare that to day one, of course, they went on, beat Nitrox 3-0, and then beat Rogue 3-0. So how do you just flip straight from day one to day two? This is the biggest case of morale at LAN, is on the day, and coaches help with that so much to be able to try and turn a team around.
Yeah, I wouldn't go so far as to say, like, you know, beating Icon 3-0. I mean, certainly with the 3-1 or 3-2
like
series.
I said.
Yeah, 3-1 probably the most likely event in that case, because Icon's still a great team. But again, yeah, I agree with you. I would have waited up to predict PSG above Icon if I was on that analyst desk, to be honest. And again, I just want to see them do well. I just want to see them in the playoffs, man. I want to see them, you know, go for a good run at a championship, because they can do it. I know they can do it, but just the few elements about the scene that just restrict them from going for the furthest, sort of like, you know, the furthest that they can, is what's holding them back right now. And it just breaks my heart, man. It just breaks my heart. PSG has so much potential, probably more potential than any team in EU right now. Like, they can do so much. They can just they have so much potential. I just want to see it realised, Bacon. And I don't think I'm the only one involved in this one. You know, I know Fruity listens to that show. I know he's got a lot of love for this. He's got a lot of love for this game, and I got a lot of love for him, man. But oh Jesus, like I just wish something would shift.
You can see the potential, and it's been there for ages, and it just has not happened yet. Because like for now, when I look at Triple Trouble with Kasia coming back in, he did come back in because he was on the original roster and then got dropped for Speed. Comes back, of course, or was it for Random? I can't remember. And then for Speed. But essentially, it is that case of, I reckon Triple Trouble are the new highest potential. They're not. I can see them getting to top 8 at LAN, of course, coming up, but probably not further than that. PSG, I'm thinking the same thing now of that performance, because their group, they've got NRG, which I would put PSG at a loss to, and then they've got INTS, one of the South American teams. Now, INTS, from what I've seen of them, because, you know, we did do a little bit of casting over the South American stuff, I reckon they're smart enough to just purely focus on PSG. They can go back through Dallas and see how to beat them. They're not going to care for NRG because it's a 3-team group. You've only got to get one win essentially in that group to go through. NRG, I can expect them to beat both INTS and PSG, and then it's both INTS, and then INTS is going to be focusing purely solely on PSG to make top 8, and then they've done their job. They've broken expectations, you know. So they're a team that are smart. They know their case going into that. And I'm a little bit worried for PSG purely for that case, because PSG are going to be fighting for everyone. They're a team that are going to be wanting to go far. They're going to be wanting their chances of winning LAN, aren't they? They're not going to be settling for just making it out of groups. They want to go into the semi-finals and then on to the finals. And they're going up against competition which are taking a sore hard look at just them.
And the thing about INTS as well is that I could actually see them pulling it off, to be honest. Like I could see them beating PSG if they focus hard enough. Like I can see a world where that is reality. And that scares me so much, because what will that do to PSG to knock them? Again, if they're listening to this, from my analytical perspective, guys, it's not. There's nothing wrong with you. There's something wrong with something else. Like, you know, that's the issue that's holding you back. It's nothing to do with any of your players. And I'm saying this because I fear for the worst right now. PSG they're doing so well in certain aspects, but it's at the end of the day, every team strives for that championship placement, and they're just not getting the championship placement. They need a coach, and I think they need to have more coach involvement. And again, unless that second thing is changed up in the rule set, we probably won't see that come through. But a coach would be the best thing to do here for PSG. You know, I mean, I don't know who they'd get. I don't know. Again, we have had some, you know, ideas and prospects being thrown out, but I don't know who would work for PSG, to be honest. Like, that's another whole theoretical aspect that we can go down a whole different rabbit hole for, but we are short on time, and we need to get out of here eventually. But yeah, man, like PSG, I just want to see them succeed so badly. I think that's the way we should wrap up this whole topic. Because yeah, man, I just want to see something good come out of them. Right. Talk about Complexity as our final team to discuss
Leave
here.
on a good note.
let's leave on a good note because they've been doing all right. They've been doing pretty good. They just promoted to the RLCS. It's been fantastic for them. And this LAN event, it compiles and adds on to that success because they had a really stellar run over the course of this LAN event. They started out, let me see if I can find them on the bracket because my Google Chrome is very terrible at showing me decent colors. Actually, I mean, to be fair, most of the colors on these brackets are fucking blue.
It's Group C on day one, by the way.
Group C on day one. Thank you for pointing that out. Yes, so they had a pretty good run. They beat out Afterthought and lost to G2. Then they beat up Alpha 90 to get into the next stage, and where they beat out PSG and lost to FC Barcelona, and then eliminated Renault Vitality. And then of course they went on to face off against Cloud9, who were the tournament winners eventually, and they lost to them as well. So they made top 8, and they made it pretty well. Again, that 5th and final team that made it into the into the playoffs as EU representatives. And to be honest, Take a notice of the teams that they lost to. FC Barcelona and G2 and Cloud9. All really good squads, all of which have their own individual sort of, claims to fame over the course of their regions, or could be argued as some of the best in the world. And I'd say that those things considered, and Complexity still making it into the top 8 despite that, it really proves the potential that this team has. And again, go back a few months, we were taking a look at this team without Flakes, and it's a complete role reversal to what we've seen from Complexity, and I could see them being a contender for a decent mid-table RLCS. I know that you've disagreed with me on this in the past, but I think this LAN result kind of proves my point.
It does, and at the same time, doesn't yet. Essentially, it's an Complexity are an inconsistent team. Just take a look back to Leipzig. So I'm not completely convinced yet, but they're on the road to it, which is great to see. You know, Complexity, I could see actually do it having a stronger run than your Dignitas or Bricks next season. So that's good. That definitely means they are going to be in contention and try and make it to LAN next time round. They've got loads of... this is a team with a lot of potential, of course. Little things could be changed within the team, but they're on the right track. Because when you look at their, let's say their losses, like you said, G2 was in Game 5. Cloud9 was a 3-0 sweep, but it was 1-goal differentials. But you look at their wins against Complexity, 1-0, 3-0, 1-0. They didn't get... Sorry, Renault Vitality couldn't even get a goal against them. And then, of course, their loss against Barca. Barca is, like, the bogey team for so many guys. Their win against PSG was 3-0, 1-0, 2-0. PSG couldn't even get a goal with them. So, essentially, if they're allowed to play their play style, they are fantastic. Their problem is when they come up against a team with a very, very solid way of how they like to play, e.g., not EG, but Cloud9 and Barca, where they are so hard teams that you literally have to go up against them and counter-strat, stop them from what they're doing, which Complexity hasn't got there yet. But until next RLCS, they've got a ton of time because that's going to take place in September. So... Complexity, we said it earlier about teams with potential. I reckon Complexity could be the next on the list for having so much potential because all they've got to do is work on consistency and try and figure out how to stop teams' playstyles.
Yeah, I think that's. I completely agree with you on that front. Like, I can't say a word against it. Complexity's issues are with the teams above them rather than the teams at their level. And even then, with the teams above them, they are doing good. They are doing some really good stuff. Against the PSGs of the world, against the Renault Vitalities of the world.
I could see Speed going to as well.
Potentially, I mean that would be a jump that would make a lot of heads turn. I mean, I'm not sure who he'd replace in there. I don't really want to see Flakes go because Flakes has been the support beam essentially for this side, and I think that honestly he would be a bad idea to get removed. I mean, I don't want to talk about roster moves just yet.
Yeah, it'd be Greasy if it was that side, but then Greasy has really come back into his own because I did not used to rate him, but looking at him here, he's starting to get back and actually prove his worth. So. I'd hold off on that thought because, again, EU, I don't expect wild roster changes coming up this season round. It's going to be a pretty boring one. But I will give props to Greasy, that I didn't used to rate him. Now he's got a good, solid rating. He's like a 7 out of 10 in my books. He could do better, but he's getting there.
I did watch the Vitality series, and I think that, you know, he didn't do anything amazing as far as my recollection, but, you know, I do think that he was a solid player, and he certainly filled back into the shoes of being a pretty solid, you know, RLCS, RLRS level player, potentially RLCS now that we're seeing the complexities like get promoted in the next season. Excuse me. I think that, honestly, do you know what? Like, I wouldn't make a roster move with this team. I don't think if I was in that squad, I'd be like, no, let's stick with this one because it seems to be a formula that's working, you know. And there were some results that you could put down that underperformance. You know, you could say PSG themselves weren't looking confident. Obviously, we talked about that just in depth. We talked about Vitality and how they weren't. They also weren't looking confident in their particular run. So there is an argument to make that Complexity might not have as many as many results on their name. But I would also say that, you know, with the results that they've seen so far, with the consistency of how, you know, they've always been able to shine, and even though they have been losing to top tier teams, they have been able to bring the fight close to them. I think that there's a lot more than just some caveats and asterisks to add next to their results. I think that this run was legit, and I think the Complexity have a bright future ahead of them. And again, very surprising to hear that coming in, considering that a few months ago we thought it was over, we thought it was done, and maybe that might also be applying to Mousesports, considering that we believe that that they might be done at this stage. So yes, anyways, that is going to be it for today's podcast, unless you have anything else you want to talk about in regards to Dreamhack.
No,
Bacon.
I think we need to wrap up, probably go get lunch or something, because, well, I've got to take the dog out for a walk anyway, and that's just woken him up, so I think we should wrap up, Jay.
Indeed we should. So yes, once again, thank you very much for watching and listening. It's been a bit of a meaty show. Honestly, I like doing these features. I think we should do some more features in the future, because it makes the podcast really long, and we've gotten to the 2-hour mark, and that gives you, of course, a large amount to listen to on your regular commutes and playing and matchmaking and what have you. So yes, be sure to enjoy the podcast as it stands, and again, get involved via the Discord links in the show notes and video descriptions, as well as on Twitter at RLAftershock, and follow the Twitch channel at twitch.tv/RLAftershock. We are making moves behind the scenes to hopefully get the Aftershock live streams going again after TCS is finished, hopefully. The plan's still kind of working up. We're still trying to see if we can work out some decent dates and get the staff involved. So we are working on that. Bear with us a little bit, and again, keep following that channel, because eventually we will get it back together. Anyways, that's going to be it for this episode of Aftershock. Next week, we might be taking a break, because I don't know if there's anything going on at the moment in Rocket League.
Nope, it's a boring week.
It's a boring week, so yeah, we might take the week off depending on how things roll. I'm pretty sure we would, because unless anything massive breaks, then of course we will do a show. But for the time being, I think we're going to call it at a break week and then come back after the after the week after that, where the finals of TCS will be going down. We were looking into the finals for the RLCS, because that will be coming very, very close at that stage. So maybe we might get some guests back in. Maybe I might do another prediction game, despite how fucking horribly that went last time, Bacon. Right then, anyways, for the time being, though, we're going to wrap up for this week. Thank you very much for listening, Bacon. Any final words from your fine self?
Not really. Nothing really to think about.
I'm going to stop asking you this question, because you've stopped being very interested in this.
I'm looking at the Nintendo Switch at the moment, my one, and I'm just thinking, should I get Rocket League on that? Like, how bad is it on the Switch? So I've played it a little bit, and it's pretty arse, but when we go off to TCS, I do want to play Rocket League, like, on the plane, just be there. Like, it's a pretty cool experience.
No, man, I'm going to be smashing the shit out of my Switch right now. Smash Brothers has been my go-to game on Switch for the longest time in the world. Mario Party as well, actually.
The other day.
On Switch, really? Yeah. Oh my god, mate! No, don't
me and my mates were all drunk,
don't,
and we were just doing like a 4-player Monopoly and just getting all angry at each other.
Mate, don't make me play that, because it will destroy our friendship, and eventually we'll have a press release going that Aftershock has been cancelled. So let's just not do that at all. But yes, we'll talk about those stories probably another day, another time. For now, though, we're going to end off the show again. Thank you very much for watching and listening. I've been the Eternal Jay. This has been Digital Bacon, and we'll see you back next week or the week after for even more of the Aftershock.